And we are live. Welcome, folks, to episode 3787 of the Survival Podcast. And we're going to talk about something we talked about a lot last year, but haven't talked about for a while, and that is the magic of mushrooms. I didn't specifically say magic mushrooms. That might come up today. I doubt it, though. We're really talking about mushrooms, in the words of our guest today, in the form of building soil, growing food, and creating self-sufficiency. And I think that's one of the things that's really attracted me to mushrooms over the years. Additionally, I freaking like to eat them a lot, a great deal. They're one of my favorite things in the world. So we're going to be talking about that today, and from a bunch of different angles, including some we really haven't covered before. And I think that if you were with me through the last year, we've kind of made a really good case for how anybody can do this, including very small scale and very small environments, including a lot of places where producing much of your own food is not easy, like you apartment dwellers. If you're an apartment dweller, you want self-sufficiency and you eat mushrooms, or you use them medicinally, either or both, you probably want to be growing them, because the space efficiency alone is pretty crazy. I've got a little Martha tent right behind me. You guys can't see from the screen, but it's about 2 foot by 2.5 foot footprint, maybe a little bigger than that. Probably 3 foot by 2 foot footprint because of the stuff that's outside of it. And, like 5 shells, and I can grow more mushrooms out in there than I can eat by a long shot. And that says something about the efficiency of space and the ability to do this really anywhere. In fact, in many ways, it's in a lot of climates, it's easier to do inside than outside. I'll get a very narrow window where this is even feasible outside my climate, but I can grow them indoors year round. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more today, including how to improve your soil if you grow a lot of stuff in the garden. Before we do that, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors of the day. Sponsor of the day, number one today, is Start9, Sovereign Computing and Private Servers. Look, you ever hear the term the cloud? You know what that is? That's someone else's computer. That's Amazon's computer or Google's computer or whatever, meaning someone else is controlling your data, controlling your access to your data, and being a security risk to your data. Because believe it or not, Tom, Bill, Sam, Tabitha, Tammy, Susan, there ain't that many people out there, super badass hackers like you see in stupid commercials on TV trying to break into your computer. They're really not. They're looking for honey holes. They're looking for a place where they get a lot of information in one spot, like, credit bureaus and things like that. Customer databases. When you can get in there, you get the data on millions of people in one go. That's a hell of a lot better than getting it for Susan who doesn't have anything. So that risk reward ratio works against you there. You can also, with Start9, not only make that problem go away, but run your own Bitcoin node, run your own Lightning node, act as your own bank and merchant account with that. You can set up end-to-end private messaging, completely 100% encrypted file storage you can access from anywhere in the world. And you get a discount, 9% as an MSB member, and you can stack that discount with a Fold gift card discount and earn sats back on top of it if you want to do that, if you play the game all the way through. So check out Start9 Sovereign Computing today. And if you want to know more about them, go to the Survival Podcast and just put Start9 in the search bar. We've actually had folks from Start9 on the show a couple times to talk about the product itself. Next up today, Biltong USA. I'm a big meat eater, man. I mean, we'll say, what should I eat as a snack if I want to keep my carbs down? Meat, something that had a face. It's real easy. Biltong, Drew Wars, and Kalbanazi sausages, and stick biltong, and more. You'll find it all at Biltong USA, along with some really cool other things imported from around the world. Anton, a good friend of Liberty, a good friend of the show, runs BiltongUSA.com. Check the site out. And MSB members, of course, I got you guys a discount too. With that, let me bring our special guest, Andrew, on. Andrew, man, welcome to the Survival Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to talk about this. I've always been a mushroom fanatic. About the only thing I don't like as far as mushrooms go are the cheap white ones on top of an undercooked pizza. About every other way I've ever eaten a mushroom, I've loved it. I think a lot of people don't like them because maybe that's what they think a mushroom is supposed to be, and it's not. But can we start off with, before we even get into mushrooms, like, what is your background before you were involved with mushrooms? Like, you're in high school trying to figure out what to do with your life. How do you get from that point of indecision to where you are now?
You want to go all the way back to high school?
High school, college, something. Before you were growing mushrooms on blocks of wood and shit.
Yeah. So I actually started off in high school thinking I was going to go into seminary, and I did go into seminary.
Oh wow!
And then actually found that I didn't. While I had a great relationship with the divine, I did not actually want to be a preacher. And the natural world kind of called to me. So I went to school for biology, and I was going to study ants at first. And I had a really good professor who encouraged me to choose something else. And she's like, there's going to be like 2 jobs where you're not killing ants for a living, you know? So she's like, is that what you want to do, is kill them? And I was like, no, I want to study them. She's like, well, I'd pick something else. And so while we were going through one of our studies, looking through a microscope, I noticed one of my plates was contaminated with a mold, and I watched it swell up, and I had started to hear about mushrooms at this point, and I just turned to her whenever I saw it fling a spore. I freaked out, interrupted the whole class. She came over and looked at the microscope, and I was going, it freaking flicked it. It freaking flicked it. And she's like, what did what? And she looked at the microscope, and she was like, whoa, oh my goodness, it freaking flicked it. I was like, I know. I said, I think I'm about switching over to mycology. And she said, I think that's the best decision I've ever heard a student have. She said, we don't know much about mushrooms, and what we learn over the next 50 years is barely going to scratch the surface, and it's going to completely change everything from food, fuels, material science, medicine. You know, it just keeps going on. So after that, I started growing mushrooms and started selling them just because people found out I had them. And so I dropped out of school because I was already doing what I wanted to do.
Excellent. Man, that fits well with our ethos. I've always said there are certain career paths that university's the way to go. Like, there's a gatekeeping apparatus in place, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I mean, like, if somebody's going to like cut me open and remove my kidney and replace it, I kind of want some gatekeeping around that profession. I can accept that. Or if they're going to be, figuring out the load capacity of a bridge that semi trucks are going to go over with professional engineering. Yeah. But when you can actually go do the thing you want to do, especially if you're already doing it, and giving a university a lot of your money and time isn't going to make that better. I don't get it. So I'm down with the dropout ethos where it makes sense. And it sounds like for you it did.
Well, I paid off my my first year. I'd racked up just at community college like $10,000-$12,000 in student loans, and by my second year, I dropped out and paid off all my student loans within the first year off mushrooms. So
that's the way to go, man. Mushrooms for the win. So if you have student loan forgiveness, what you really want is mushrooms. How can mushrooms be integrated into a homestead system, though? Because there's a lot of things we can do. We can improve soil. Mm-hmm. We can recycle waste. We can increase food production, and we can do that with minimal equipment, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you can go as high tech as you want. Don't get me wrong. I have gone as far into the high tech as I can afford to go, and I plan on going further. And I love the high tech side, but I also started off with and have a love and appreciation for the low tech, simple systems. I mean, if you're just adding mushrooms to like a homestead or a self-reliance setup, I feel like the low tech makes a lot more sense than trying to go high tech. If you're going to specialize in the mushrooms for the rest of your life, maybe you can do some high tech stuff. But the easiest way is to I was listening to one of your podcasts last night where you had been putting the stems into the coffee grounds.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And that's a great way to do it, is to create what we think of it in terms of like mother patches. Like if you are growing a patch of something that produces off rhizomes, like a Jerusalem artichoke, it's very simple to dig up another patch of that, plant that somewhere else.
Correct.
If you get into the point where you're making cardboard spawn or simple sawdust spawn or, even coffee spawn, this allows you to take those chunks and now you can start adding them and just kind of creating patches or getting into inoculating logs. I mean, that's probably the most homesteaders I know of tend to try to escape somewhere that's a forested rural location. And that's a great place to get into mushrooms because you have access to logs. I have a buddy that calls North America the Saudi Arabia of agroforestry. So the nice thing is we got all the logs we could ever use. And this allows you to grow a massive amount of food on something that, quite frankly, doesn't look like a food source. It
Yeah.
just looks like a
Yeah.
pile of logs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the easiest ethic to get into it with, is to start thinking of it in terms of mother patches, and then you can start getting kind of crazy with it. You can even start getting into, I mean, we do like homemade liquid culture, things like that, which is something that people can actually do at home now at this point, through a variety of methods. But it can be as high tech or as low tech as you want.
Yeah, and we're gonna focus probably more on the low tech today because of the
Yep.
audience, right? And I think that there is a lot that you can do from a low tech standpoint. Like I said, I can't really grow a lot outside,
Mm-hmm.
but there's parts of the year where I can plant a whole spawn block into the ground and it'll fruit beautifully for me.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
I'll put it
absolutely.
into a compost bioreactor and it'll do the same thing. And you were mentioning the coffee, so like I've kind of refined that since I was messing with it last year. So I'm still doing the initial culture in the jar, but then I'm upscaling that jar culture into about a 5 to 6 pound block that's a third
Mm-hmm.
coffee grounds, a third wood pellets, hardwood pellets, and a third straw. And that's worked freaking beautifully. I
Yeah,
mean,
I bet that would work really, really well.
whether
The
it's going in the
straw and
market
sawdust make it
tent
great.
or outside, it works, especially oysters. I mean, oysters are,
Yeah.
everybody says start with Strophoria, which are great for soil amending and all, but maybe it's where I live, but I have not found it easy to do at all compared to oysters. Oysters, like I look at them and they colonize something else.
Yeah, that's been my experience with oysters. I tend to specialize when it comes to doing the mushroom breeding and creation of new strains and collection of wild strains. We tend to focus on oysters because they're one of the most immediately useful organisms when it comes to a variety of things, including biofuels, but also food production to an insane degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you ask about like how simple it can be. You can take if you've got a chainsaw, which I know a lot of homesteader types do. If you've got a chainsaw, you can be inoculating logs, super quick and easy. And there's you could make cardboard spawn in your kitchen
Yeah.
off of oyster stem butts because they're so aggressive. When
Yeah.
it comes to wine cap, for example, the King Stropharia, the places you tend to think of that doing really well are places like the Pacific Northwest, Kentucky, Virginia, maybe the eastern the Northeast area.
Pennsylvania, New
Yeah,
York. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, you're in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it. I remember it's been a little while, but there was an episode I was watching where you were out there feeding your ducks and stuff, and you had just gotten into ducks.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing it was very dry, very arid, and that kind of
Yeah,
situation.
it's crazy. Like right now, everybody's under snow, and my place is so green it almost hurts your eyes. It's so
Yeah.
bright green. But
Yeah.
come July, August, everything's brown. And I mean,
Right.
it looks like somebody went out and spread straw. That's what my grass turns into, and you walk on it and it cracks. And I have friends that'll come down here from up north, and like they'll be out in August in the morning, get up early, drink coffee, and you see them walking out and they're like touching the ground. They're like, "Where's the dew?" Bro, there's no dew. The dew will be here in November. That's what the dew is due in November. We don't have moisture. We have heat and dry. And
Yeah.
we do have some outdoor mushrooms that handle a lot of this. Not that severe, but most of them tend to not be very useful. False parasol, destroying angels, stuff like that. That's what pops up around here on its own.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be kind of rough. That at that point, growing indoors is probably the solution if you're wanting all year round. The good news is like you probably have shoulder seasons or even your winter
we do.
season. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's gonna grow great, and then you can do preservation methods. So in the cooler temps, it's really easy to grow like king oysters when it's cooler.
Yeah.
And king oysters are one of the best pickling mushrooms I've ever come across. We just do a pickle brine. And then thankfully, because we got into this, we have a big autoclave. Just think big pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So 150-liter pressure cooker, we can line that thing up with enough mushroom pickles to last us the rest of the year.
Oh, man.
It's really nice.
What got me on those is when I found out you could cook them kind of like scallops, cook the stems like that.
Yeah.
And I tried it and I'm like, and then I don't know if you've seen, I don't know what's going on with my setup, but I'm growing blue oysters that get stems like a king.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why it's happening, and I can't figure it out. And every
Where
time
did
I
you
think
get
I
the
figured it
strain?
out, I'm like, well, I'll change the thing I think that's doing it, and it still does it. So I'm just going to accept it.
Where did you get the strain at?
Initially Mushroom Mountain, but I've grown them from like my own cultures from like culture's not the right word because it's much more
Right.
low tech. My own spawn that I've made from store-bought blue oysters. And I still
Okay.
get these
So
giant freaking stems and everything else. Like I do lion's mane and it looks like proper form, or I'll do like golden oyster. It is only the blue oysters that do this. I don't get it.
we have a strain. The first strain I ever bred and released was called a King Blue, and
Okay.
it was because it was a blue oyster with that very king-like stem.
Yeah.
And that was actually something that you were starting to see, is that it's not the only blue oyster that does that. So there's some sort of underlying genetics there, but also mushrooms. Like even if you take, like we do a lot of wild collection, if we collect a wild strain, we bring it inside and grow it, it'll grow completely different than the outside.
Oh, I
than it
agree
did
with
on the
that.
outside.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The
Yeah, and
outdoors
when I
almost
put the
always
same
better
stuff out in
quality.
the garden during the right time of year, it looks like a normal blue oyster. They get huge,
Right.
but they're not that big giant stem. And I thought maybe it was light, so I added like pure plant lights to the roof of the tent, and I don't know, just
it'll do that, and you'll bring them indoors. The reason why we think this is because a lot of people, if you've heard of epigenetics,
yeah,
you have your basic genetics, which is brown eye, blue eye, mix them. But epigenetics are switches that can be turned on during the organism's life, and mushrooms are far more plastic, genetically speaking, than we are.
Okay.
They've got all these cool pathways they can turn on and off, and it'll make them look different. It'll make them eat different things. It'll make them do all kinds of crazy stuff. So, not to get too far into the genetics level kind of stuff. It means that their mushrooms are extremely adaptable, even by doing the mother culture stuff to different situations, and they'll throw some really interesting shapes like that.
When you were talking about using a chainsaw and making your own spawn out of like cardboard or something, can you describe that maybe a little bit on what that would look like? Somebody doing that?
Well, there's a couple of different ways, and this is one of the things I love about mushrooms, is that there's like 15 million different pathways to get from A to B. But for instance, I've got that electric chainsaw in the background, just a DeWalt electric chainsaw. I don't need a lot. I can charge it off my solar panels. It's super fun to do that. As we're cutting the log, we'll just cut down and then cut another strip right next to it so that there's a wide gash in the log that goes about halfway down in the log. And then we'll just take a bag of sawdust spawn, which is this right here.
Yep.
And this one is particularly special to me because I was cutting on some logs. I swept up all the sawdust shavings, and then you can see the mycelium growing in there. So the next round of logs I have free spawn for the next round of logs.
All right.
This is because this was pressure cooked, and then we added the culture to it. But if you wanted to do cardboard spawn, it can be as simple as taking some cardboard. You don't want anything slick or with metallic colors. You want the plain old corrugated cardboard. You can take that, put it in like a little shoebox or tub or something, pour boiling water over it, let it cool till it's not cool enough to handle, drain that, and then you can take stem butts and literally roll them up in cardboard spawn, stuff them in a Ziploc bag, throw them in the fridge, and then wait until they turn white. And now you can pull those out, unwind them, and you've got these sheets. And if you wanted to, you can cut a gash in the log and then just stuff that with the cardboard spawn. Yep. And then bam, you've made spawn, low tech spawn.
So I guess that would work well too for like you cut off a flush stump.
Oh yeah,
plunge cut into it, fill it up. Because what I've done is basically cut a layer off and then sandwiched it. But maybe that's not necessary.
That's totem style, and I would totally do that if you wanted to. If you're doing a stump, I would absolutely. Or like you say, like a plunge router, and then you can stuff the cardboard spawn in there or something. But the biggest thing is when you do it on something like a stump, you want to make sure that you cover it so it doesn't dry out. Because you don't want it to dry out before, like you want to give the mycelium enough time that it can get from the spawn into the wood. Once it's in the wood, you're pretty much golden.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about strain genetics, strain selection. can we talk a little bit about strain variation? You were kind of hitting on that, and like that can be. It seemed to be over the head of this, like the small homesteader or something, but I think they can still utilize that.
Sure. So, I mean, the genetics just means that each a strain is a genetically unique organism. So, if you've got golden oysters, for example, and you've got 5 different strains, those 5 are still golden oysters, but they are unrelated. They're sisters, cousins, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The genetics matters because we'll get differences not just in the shape and the quality of the mushroom, but we also get different active compounds, different levels of those. So if you want to use mushrooms medicinally, a lot of times you want strains. You're starting to see strains bred for those purposes. And so it's kind of cool because you can pull in a lion's mane, for example, that is bred to have a higher fatty acid profile. So therefore more of the materials that you're actually looking for. And you can get a lot more out of your extracts when you're cooking them or whatnot. As far as like the wild genetics goes, we're starting to see a little bit of this stuff. A lot of like around me, for example, especially during COVID, this accelerated big time, where we had people moving here and they're just taking forests that I used to roam around as a kid and just they're gone the next day. Wetlands are starting to be kind of messed up, and wetlands are a great place to find some of the most medicinally relevant mushrooms.
Yeah.
And so we're collecting these things. Not that I actually don't think. I think if everything went to pot, mushrooms would be okay. We're the ones that are in trouble.
Yeah.
But you have all these interesting strains that are out there that will produce different compounds, eat different materials better than the others. That will be more useful to us, and we're losing those. We're losing those at a impossibly fast rate.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much the earth will be fine without us if we go the way of the dodo by our own means. I remember years and years ago, I was at an event called Permaculture Voices, and I was getting up in the morning to go meet somebody for breakfast, and there was a like TV show that was just on the channel when I turned the TV on. It was so like Nat Geo or something. It was about abandoned buildings in Chicago, and these buildings had only been abandoned for like 20 years, and it looked like something from like Temple of Doom or something. Like they were showing like sediment would form on the roof of the building, and then a tree would grow, and like these trees were like eating the building. And I was talking to Toba Hemingway about it, and he was like, yeah, it's amazing that they can survive up there. And at that time, it didn't occur to me. Now it occurs to me that fungus are why that happened, right? It's not just that they'll now have a place to call. They were there probably before that tree started eating that building.
Right. Absolutely, they were. I apologize for the dog.
No, that's all right. Dogs are cool.
He likes to alert when people come through. But yeah, absolutely. The mushrooms are already there. The spores are everywhere. And they can lay dormant forever. We've come across a lot of tests that they've done where spores can survive the vacuum and radiation of space. Yeah. So that stuff's just sitting around, and it's waiting. It's waiting for us to stop cleaning, for a little moisture, a little organic material to build up somewhere, and then they're off to the races.
They'll come back, yeah. We've seen things like pinks and goldens showing up everywhere when they're actually from other, initially other biomes and stuff like that. Yep. Kevin just said goldens are taking over around me. I wish they would take over here. I mean, I think something grew here on its own without me having to make it that was useful. Because they're one of the best tasting freaking mushrooms I've ever had, honestly.
They are, but they're also the organism that contains the most L-ergothioneine out there. So, which is an incredible anti-inflammatory.
Really?
Yep. And golden oysters get a lot of hate because they weren't native to this biome that we know of, but you're starting to see them, especially in the Midwest, form around. Interestingly enough, they get a lot of hate for that, but if you overlay a map of the spread of the golden oyster over a map of the spread of the emerald ash borer that's killing a bunch of these ash trees, it's the same map.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. It's not that the golden oysters are taking over; it's that they're riding another invasive species.
They're colonizing ash on the back of the emerald, right?
In fact, I think that I suspect there might be spores that the emerald ash borers are carrying around with them, or fragments of mycelium, and as they tunnel through the wood, they're just leaving that behind.
It wouldn't be the first such association.
Right. Yeah. Beetles and fungi have a wonderful association like
that.
Yeah.
The blue fungus beetle in the Midwest that's hit the lodgepole pine so hard.
Yep.
It's for those in the audience, I'm sure you know this, but the blue beetle lays its larva in the tree, and then the larva actually somehow is associated with the fungus, the blue fungus, and the tree basically produces a plug of sap, and it pushes the larva out, which then pupates and harvests. But the tree's own healing seals in the fungus, and it seals the tree's doom, and that's why it actually is when they go ahead and take those trees out once they're dying, and they should. It's beautiful lumber.
Oh yeah, some
that blue fungi there's nothing like it in the world. And instead, what a lot of our foresters have done is, well, it's nature, we should not touch it. So what happens is the whole side of the mountain, the trees die, and then the trees all rot in place, and nothing replaces them. And then we get mudslides, and they go, I don't know what happened.
Right, right. Well, sometimes, so the truth is that as we're the dominant organism on the planet, as we move, we're changing the environment as much, if not more, than a lot of other species. And there's no helping that. If we want to thrive as a species, if we want to grow, we can be a little bit more thoughtful on these things.
Yeah.
But we could be better stewards. And part of that stewardship is perhaps trying to curtail some of that damage, replant it. Like, these blights are going to come through and move through with such speed that they're going to cause damage before we ever understand them. But we can come back, and if we understand how to restart an ecosystem much better, much faster, then that is a good stewardship, in my opinion. You won't have the mudslides. You'll be able to shore up the banks. And
Bill Mollison had a treatise and a theory that like these things, like these fungi that are taking out these trees before they die, is because we've damaged the ecosystem. The tree was already dying, and because the tree wouldn't come to the soil, the fungi went to the tree. He called it the Great Phantasm or something like that in one of his writings. And he was so smart. Like, he wrote that in the 80s and 90s. He wrote that series, and when you look back at it now it's so obviously prophetic and accurate. It's kind of crazy, but fungi always seem to play a role somewhere because they're like the greatest opportunists. Like, they see the niche, they find the niche, and because they travel the way that they do through exploring, and the speed that spores travel, like you're talking about afflicted. Like, when I started reading about all that, I was like, oh my God, it really is the third kingdom. It's a whole different life type, and we really don't even understand it. I don't believe at all yet. I think we know a lot about it, but we don't understand it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So I think we know a little bit about the how to operate with it, how to use it a little bit, and I think that's humanity tends to be the first thing we understand. Right? Is, oh, here's a button we found in the universe. If we push this button, oh, look, it does this. Yeah, but we don't understand the workings.
That it opens up, right? Like,
right.
It can be problematic. A cartoon, like push button, and you see like the thing, and the guy smiling, and behind him, like a bomb's going off.
Well, fair enough. Sometimes that's the case too. That's the problem with being button pushers.
Yeah.
But what's interesting too is that a lot of the mushrooms, humans are great at creating disturbance. We create very dynamic, disturbed habitats, and a lot of the mushrooms that we see and associate with ourselves, these guilds that are most useful to us, actually thrive in this disturbed habitat. I think it's interesting that we've tend to pick annuals over perennials, which annuals tend to like a disturbed habitat. Humans we're a disturbance species. We kind of get in there and start messing with stuff, and bam, what responds to us is what we tend to grow around us.
Agreed. So you mentioned in the notes I have for the show today that low-tech affordable mushroom production can produce 50 to 100 pounds a week easily for somebody that wants to do that. Can you kind of talk about that? Because, bro, if I produce more than 5 pounds a week, I don't know what to do. I'm
right. Yeah.
I'm freeze drying them and giving them away, or dehydrating them and giving them away, because my wife won't really eat much with mushrooms. So it's all me.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. The easiest way to do it would just be to order spawn from somewhere else, put that into some sort of grow material, whether that be, I mean, people do bucket grows, tub grows, all kinds of stuff. I'm a big fan of the bag grows.
Yeah.
To me, they're the most efficient use of my time. But again, if I was doing this on a homestead and I didn't want to be wasting plastic, or if I wanted to do a number of other things, I would grow on logs. And you can absolutely, if you grow, you can grow for most of the year, especially with like a shade house and a sprinkler system. You can find mushrooms that will grow all year long. You can do those on logs. And again, it can be as simple as buying some sawdust spawn in, cutting into the log. And then what you want to do is produce every week, a few logs a week, and keep that going. And then eventually, once you have a full calendar of logs set up, they'll just continue producing for years. So you don't have to recharge that system every so often. Bags are the fastest way to get there. And the easiest way would be, you don't even need a flow hood for this. If you can just pasteurize your substrate, you can buy spawn in and plant, buy spawn in and plant. And I think that that's actually a really good system for a lot of people if they want to produce a lot, because that's the way that you get the hands off. You don't have to think about it as much. You just build your grow chamber, you build your pasteurizer, and then you're off to the races. It's not the most self-sufficient route to do it that way.
Yeah.
But it does produce, like if you're to produce 100 pounds, let's say, I would want to produce about 50 of these a week. And that's actually not that hard to do. It could just like an hour on Monday, an hour on Friday, and bam, you're producing that much. But it'll feed your garden. That's the biggest thing is it'll produce that much substrate. If you're producing 50 bags a week, you're getting 50 bags coming out a week. And that is 100% organic matter you're adding to your soil. And that's something that we use to judge soil health. So that's where I would do it if I wanted to do it the simplest method. But yeah, if I wanted to do it as the self-sufficient method, I would do logs all day long.
Okay.
Just chainsaw. And then I would buy a couple of bags in, and then I would use the sawdust that comes off the chainsaw. If you get that quickly, put it in a bag, and then throw a little bit of your bag of spawn you've had in there.
Yeah.
The chainsaw action, the heat, the friction, and then you're pulling mostly interior pieces of the wood. You can just stuff that in a jar with a little bit of your shiitake spawn, for example, and it's practically sterilized. And now you can use that as the mother patches, just like we talked about. And logs to me are the most efficient way to go if you're wanting self-sufficiency.
And I kind of feel like when you're growing like in a tent environment or whatever, like being uber sanitary is maybe a little more important than when we're doing things outdoors, because if I make it completely and totally pristine when I put it outdoors, it will stay that way for about 3 seconds. Right? So all I can really do is advantage the organism that I want to do well as best I can, and then let niche decisions take it from there in nature. Like that oyster mushroom is already capable of colonizing that log. Right. The fact that I cut it open and stuffed it in there, I mean, that's and then what does it cost me to do that? 10 minutes? Not even that, a couple of minutes. Right. So if I do that 100 times in a week and only 80 of them takes, I'm still beyond what I can use at that point. And that's where I am a little jealous of people a little further north of me, or just in more humid climates, even in that what production can be done outside in those climates is insane. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, we picked mushrooms in spring, summer, and fall. About the only time we did not go out and forage something was when it was just too damn cold and everything was frozen and covered in snow.
Yep.
Like I would say into late November, you could still find some. In like mid-November-ish, around Thanksgiving, it'd go away. And then I'll see you in early April. But every other part of the year, puffballs, hen of the woods, there was something, morels, there was something out there that you could find. Oysters of all kinds, chicken of the woods, all of it, man. It was just everywhere.
Yeah, Pennsylvania is like that. Here where I'm at, East Tennessee is one of the most biodiverse regions, but what that really turns out is that we don't have a lot of any one thing. We just have a little bit of everything.
I like that too, though.
It's nice. Oh, don't get me wrong. I love it. Especially like if I go a little bit further up in the mountains, I can hit some old growth and I can find different species of Hericium, which is lion's mane. That's just the family that lion's mane's in. we can go up there to the old growth. We'll find, comb tooth and bear's head and
where did you just say? Where are you exactly at?
I'm about 30 minutes east of Knoxville, so
Okay,
I'm right in the Tennessee
right,
Valley.
right.
Yep. Yeah, I'm about 30 minutes from the mountains. I'm about 30 minutes from Knoxville. I'm right in the middle of the Tennessee Valley. And
get me down to freaking Lancaster to Nicole sometime when she's doing something down there or something. Maybe we can talk about that.
Sounds good to me. I'm always happy to help out. We actually do a lot of different work with different people. There's a guy a little bit further east of me that does this amazing farm system where he buys spawn in, grows mushrooms in his little grow room.
Yeah.
And then takes like hardware cloth and makes what I would think of as like a potato tower.
Okay.
But then he just starts throwing his used blocks in there, and then he dumpster dives because he drives a dump truck for a living.
Okay.
So he just comes across all this like food that's thrown away, like Whole Foods and other places.
Yeah.
And he starts just layering that until it's full. And then he takes a chicken tractor that he's built, sets it on top, and the chickens just dig all the way down, eat the bugs that are attracted to it, the seeds, and spread it. And then because he threw food scraps like tomatoes and stuff in there, he doesn't even plant. It's just beautiful soil, picked of clean of weeds, and then tomatoes and zucchini and all kinds of stuff just grows out of the system. He moves to the next one and the next one, and like he gets eggs, produce, and mushrooms all for the cost of.
Okay, this needs to be documented in video.
I agree.
Need to take a look at this.
I agree. I'm actually about to build a system here. I'm probably going to use quail for mine.
Yeah,
I really like quail. They're a lot easier for me to move because my oasis. We are in a warehouse.
Yeah.
So my garden is in the parking lot. Last year it was my goal. I turned our entire parking lot into an oasis using nothing but spent mushroom substrate.
Wow.
And it was beautiful. It was great. We grew a ton of food, especially aquatic food. But yeah, I agree. I'm going to try to build his system here. I'm even going to see if he'll let me come up there and film it. He's a very private person, so I don't know if he'll let me film it or not. We'll see.
Yeah, I got a dude in Missouri like that. What he's doing is earth shattering. I'm like, please let me document this before you die.
You're right.
Right? Please, right. I can explain it 100 times, but nobody's going to understand it if they don't see it, right? And what he's doing is being done in 18-foot strip rows on like 40 acres. I can't reproduce it, and like especially here, forget about it. This is not Missouri, as we've already discussed, right?
Well, his land, because he's right up on the mountain. His land's like that, it's just straight up and down. So he's like literally gardening in these little plots, just hidden around everywhere.
It's very similar to what a friend of mine named David locally is doing, but he's doing it with aquatic vegetation like that. So he's building those towers, and he basically turned his swimming pool into a pond.
Oh,
so he's got like 20-pound catfish swimming around in an in-ground swimming pool.
I see. I went with goldfish just because they're easy, and
he's got those too.
Oh, does he? I used to raise tilapia, and I got my start between when I dropped out of school and I started growing mushrooms. I actually started in aquaculture, so I worked in aquaculture for about 2 years at the world's second largest inland fish hatcheries right here in town. Who knew? So I was raising little Nemos and stuff, but that got me into aquaculture. So half my garden last year was me taking mushroom blocks, busting them up, throwing them in a tub, filling it full of water, and then putting marshland plants like duck potatoes, water spinach, and stuff like that in it. And it was great because those plants already love 100% organic matter soil. They just love that wet soil. And so I didn't even have to work. We grew all of our greens. We grew bloody dock and water spinach, water celery, things like that. And then all of that came just off spent mushroom sub, though.
I'm gonna have to start playing with the mushroom stuff into my aquaculture. We won't get into that today, but I've got a lot of aquaculture on the property.
Just be careful. I tried using it as a filter, blocks as a filter one time, and they rotted too fast. And
I wouldn't do that. I can see where that would go. What I've been playing around with, the big like 10-foot long feed troughs that they have like at Tractor Supply and Atwoods and all. I've got one that I did something with that didn't work. I've always I humped that thing. And I got to put this into an aquatic system. And what I'm going to do with it this year is line the bottom so it's going to flow through, and then basically it'll make it like a marsh.
Yep.
On a return back to a pond I have. It's an in-ground pond. It's only about 2 feet deep, but it's 8 by 16 feet, like a timber frame with a liner dropped into it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I just going to run a constant flow through there, and that would be a great way to build all the organic matter on top of the flow through.
That's exactly what I did. I've got a little test system. It's a 300-gallon feed trough.
Yeah.
with mixing tubs that are basically just on 2x4s set on there, and then I have a solar powered pump. So
Okay.
the water only runs whenever the trays are getting hot.
Yep.
But it basically allows when the sun immediately hits, like it's on the south facing side of the building,
Yeah.
that pump runs all day long.
Okay.
And then as it starts to cool off in the evening, the water slows down. That's where I grow a lot of my marshy stuff, like mints and different things like that. So that idea will definitely work.
Well, before we went off on that side quest, I liked where you were heading though with the towers and then subbing in the quail, because I do have a lot of people on either very small land or things like that, or garden homes or something like that, and they just can't do large scale. They can't do like a flock of a dozen chickens or something, and that small scale stuff is incredibly valuable because it helps the most people.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, the dog's going crazy again.
Dude, if you heard yesterday's show, the dogs went off pretty hard here.
Did it? Yeah. Our post showed up. He normally shows up about 4 o'clock, so it's a little bit of a surprise. Can you repeat just that last little bit for me? I apologize.
I don't know now. Oh, I was talking about small scale.
Oh, small scale. Yeah,
yeah. Like the quail, like that opens up a whole world of people that are in much smaller pieces of land or renting or something like that they can't even do chickens, let alone something like, ducks actually are a lot more work than people realize. I do a ton of ducks. But you start scaling up into like goats and stuff like that, you can forget about it for like probably more than 70% of the people who listen to my show. So quail, I did quail for a number of years. They're a fantastic bird, lots of production, but I never thought of like combining them into a growing system using spent mushroom spawn. That's kind of cool.
Well, my wife was the one that figured out. She would take the blocks when they came out of the grow room and then set them out in the sun and let them dry, and then she'd kind of crush them up and put them in the beds for the quail, and they would take their dust baths in the mushroom substrate. Yeah. And we started noticing that we never had mites after that. And one of the things that people find out about oyster mushroom mycelium is that oyster mushroom mycelium is capable of eating insects and things like that. And so we think that it actually worked really, really well as a mite reduction, not just the dust bathing, but maybe even the mycelium itself. We still need to test that, but
that's a reasonable hypothesis, though, given we know they do things like eat nematodes.
Yep.
They flat out eat nematodes. That's 100% proven, right?
Oh yeah, they leave out little snare traps for nematodes.
So we were kind of talking there about using mushroom spawn in a place where there is no soil, like a parking lot or whatever. But it's also a pretty good way to regenerate damaged and depleted soils as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, it is. It's I mean, again, one of the measures of health for soil is its organic matter. And the mushroom spent sub adds almost 100% organic matter. It's already pre-digested a lot of it. The mushrooms have taken out the lignin, which is what makes wood hard, basically, and it makes it hard to eat. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why oysters are good for biofuels, is that they reduce the lignin content by about 40% in about a 4-week time frame. So by the time you get your crop, and I've started playing around with this where you get your crop and then you can take that busted up block and you can I've made methane from it. I've made ethanol from some of it. But that reduction means that when it goes into the soil, it is so easy for bacteria to eat. It is so easy. You've jump started the system. It'll break down and add like all that organic matter. There's it's a fungal protein called globulin, and think of it as soil glue, and that comes from fungus. And it literally binds soil together. It makes soil bind together much, much better. And so it helps keep runoff from happening. It helps bind nutrition into the top layers of the soil so that it doesn't just get washed away. And not only that, but the organic matter holds water. So as does the mycelium. The mycelium will swell up. I think it's, I could be wrong about this, so don't quote me as gospel, but it could be, I think they swell up 10 times their size with water, and then slow release that. So it ends up even holding water in your soil. So it ends up being incredibly useful for soil building.
Yeah. As I've switched over to lots of fungal activity, bioreactor compost, and biochar in my gardens, my irrigation needs during the worst part of the year are maybe half of what at the most they are half of what they were let's say 8 years ago.
Oh yeah.
It's really incredible with just having the ability to hold, like you were saying, hold that moisture in place across time. And then I think you're starting to like feed that micro ecosystem, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Even if it's a container, like you're basically creating an ecosystem in a, like when I say container, I mean like something substantial, a 3x3 or something, but like it's a substantial amount of real estate when we get down into the world of mycelium and bacteria and other fungi and even like micro and macro arthropods and things like that. That's a whole universe, right?
It really is.
And people, I think like one thing I've tried to drive home for years is you have to start, even with your container gardening, you have to think of it that way. That's its own universe to the life that's in there.
It absolutely is, and it takes a while sometimes to build that up. We're jump starting it by adding mushroom blocks to a garden. One of my favorite ways, there's people around here, especially that still use a lot of till for their garden. We just tell them to take the blocks, to cut the plastic off, throw them out there, and then just till them into their garden. And the amount, Samantha's parents actually did a wonderful study for us by accident where she took them 2 or 3 different truckloads of these spent mushroom blocks from our grow room and went over there and helped. And they got about half the garden covered. And then life got busy and the rest of the blocks sat over there and rotted in a compost pile. But the other side of the garden never got covered. And then we had a drought. And the side that had all the mushroom blocks used as mulch, it was like they sent us pictures. You've got this gigantic jungle of zucchini and everything else.
Yeah.
And then you've got these paltry little plants just trying to eke out a little bit of something for survival. And it was like, oh, that's
pretty conclusive. Right? It might not pass the rigor of scientific judgment, but it's pretty damn conclusive. Observational science is still science, in my opinion. And
I agree.
Like that. And it really is kind of amazing how dramatic the difference is. And I think part of it is that, so we have, let's say, oyster and lion's mane mushroom block that we've thrown into a garden, and that has done a massive amount of breakdown of that organic material, but it's not all completely broke down. And fungus like successes to other fungus. So then a lot of the other fungal activity then is going to pick up when that material has been eaten down to where like an oyster mushroom's like, bro, I don't have any, there's not enough for me anymore. I need to spawn off and spore out and go somewhere else. But now you've created an environment more indicative for other forms of soil fungi, like mycorrhizal and things like that do that associative connection with plant roots. And so it's like a compounding effect. Each piece then adds to the next piece.
Oh, yeah, you might as well think of them as a prebiotic or a probiotic for your soil microbiome health. I actually heard a really interesting thing, which was someone was given the hypothesis that you could potentially take a disturbed ecosystem, you can put in piles of spent blocks of a certain type of mushroom that you picked. By picking a certain type of mushroom, you'll be attracting a certain type of insect, which will attract a certain type of bird, which will then attract a certain type of different animal, which will bring seeds from the bird poop into seeding into different things like your different trees. So is it possible, perhaps, that we can pick an ecosystem just by putting mushrooms down as the leverage point? There's my Instagram.
Yeah. I pull up mine.
Well, right. My bad.
I'm just giving people that are on the video at least some visual entertainment to go along with your commentary. But,
well, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll make sure like his Instagram, his YouTube, and everything that I have from him is in the show notes today for you guys. After the video's over, there's a link down in the video notes that'll go over to the audio side on my website, and that's where all the resources that we mentioned today will be, just as an offshoot there. Can you maybe talk about some of the biggest myths or overcomplications you see in the mushroom growing world, especially online? I see people, teaching people how to make mushroom spawn that the guy looks like he's so nervous, like he looks like he's disarming a nuclear bomb or something. Because, like, if you do one thing wrong, the world will explode and all. And I find it to be a little more forgiving than that. And I'm sure you even come with a more critical eye than me and see a lot of things that are like, just don't worry about, or like, don't do that, bro.
Yeah. So our motto around here, is primarily that everyone's doing it wrong.
Okay.
We're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to do it a little less wrong every day.
Okay.
So
I like that.
Well, I find that it gives me a good perspective, because you do get this. You get people that get into the mushroom world, and then they start, doing the actually kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You have to do it this way. This is the gospel message of mushroom cultivation. And the truth is, we don't know the vast majority of things about fungi in general. And there's going to be all kinds of different ways to achieve our goal, just like there are with plants. You talked earlier about mushrooms being the third kingdom. I mean, that's an entire kingdom, right? So just like plants are an entire kingdom, and animals are they are just as diverse. Mushrooms are just as diverse. So there's a million different ways to do it. The biggest myth to me is that there is a way to do it. Because there's not a single way. There's a lot of different ways to get your goal. You're right. I see a lot of people, they dress up in Tyvek suits and masks and goggles, and they go into clean room environments, and it looks like they're taking apart a satellite for NASA or something like that, or building one. And the truth is that we don't have to have that. The guy who taught me to grow mushrooms, kind of mentored me when I was first getting into them, was a guy named Hugh Brewer. And I went and visited him up in the mountains. He took me through his house. There you go. That's exactly what it was. And he had, you go up his stairs, and there's mushroom blocks lining the stairs all the way up. You sit on his couch, and there's mushroom blocks behind you. And he just fit them everywhere in his life. He was obsessive. His laboratory was on his back porch. And his flow hood, which is a device we use for clean air, it creates HEPA-filtered clean air space so that you can work and do the sterile work. He was using that, and he would just cover that with plastic when he wasn't using it. And then he would go take the plastic off, turn it on, sanitize his work area. I'm not saying this is the best lab. I'm just saying that's the way he ran his entire business. That's the way he ran his entire mushroom farm. And he produced hundreds of pounds a week with a laboratory that was on his back porch. He did eventually build it and bring it in and build a basement farm and basement lab. But you don't when I first started, I was doing open air transfers. What that means is I didn't have any clean room environment whatsoever. I would clean a work area, and I would work with plates just upside down. I didn't have a pressure cooker. I literally microwaved agar, one plate at a time. I would make agar, pour it, and then I would microwave it. It would open, and then I would slowly open the door so as not to let microbes in there, and close the plates. Like that got me to the point where I made enough money I could get a flow hood, where we got to the point where we could build a lab and then a grow room, and we bootstrapped everything. I remember when we built our first sterilizer, pasteurizer, we were so poor that we went downstairs to the basement bathroom and robbed a float valve out of the toilet to put a refill valve on our pasteurizer, because we couldn't even afford that. So, I mean, you can take mushrooms and bootstrap it all you want, and in a bunch of different ways that are not technically correct. And it'll get you to a point where, I mean, mushrooms raised us out of poverty. So.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of adopt that with a lot of things, I think. Thanks for telling me that I'm doing it wrong. It was by doing it wrong that I made enough money to buy the stuff so I could do it less wrong. And if I keep doing it less wrong long enough, I'll make enough money so that I can do it right. But I appreciate your advice while I'm doing that. And that advice almost inevitably comes from someone if they're on YouTube, you look at their channel, and what it always says is, this channel has no content.
Yeah, that's actually true. Yeah.
My granddad called that the peanut gallery.
Peanut gallery?
Yeah, don't worry about the peanut gallery. They're not there to help you, and they couldn't if they wanted to, is what he used to say.
Yeah, those comments used to really drive me crazy. I used to be terrified of cameras and public speaking and everything. And mushrooms kind of pushed me into it because people were so curious. But I got a comment the other day that almost, I was like, oh my gosh, I could let this bother me. But then I went and clicked on his name, and it was a channel that said this channel has no content. I was like, oh, never mind. I'm not.
What's the point, right? I've gotten very stoic on it. I've actually gotten somewhat empathetic. I'm like, man, if you really have the time to worry about what I'm doing wrong, then there's a big hole
Yeah.
in your life, bro, and you should fill that hole with something other than your dislike of me. But if I'm what does it for you, then I humbly submit to that place in life.
Oh yeah, like I'm so busy, I don't have time to look at other people's content half the time. So
yeah. So other than the backs of people like that, what are some of the waste streams we can tie into, like wood chips and sawdust and cardboard and spent grain and garbage? Garbage and basic. Like I use coffee grinds. I mean, there's like almost anything organic can be used for some form of mushroom cultivation.
Absolutely. Part of it's understanding mushroom nutrition, I think, in that you have to think of it a lot like you do when you're compost pile, right? When you're feeding your compost pile, you get a certain amount of greens and you got a certain amount of browns that you feed. You have something similar for mushrooms. Most mushrooms that we grow are white rot fungi. That's the ones that we find most useful. It just means that when they rot wood, they bleach it and they leave behind. But oysters, shiitake, even the actives that, every time someone finds out you're growing mushrooms, they've got the jokes about the actives. All of that stuff is white rot fungi. That is what we have found. Those are disturbance species. They like lignin. They like browns, but a little bit of greens, a little bit of hot material. Like coffee grounds are actually really hot and
nitrogen.
They're not the best thing to grow. You can grow mushrooms on them by themselves, but they're not the best thing to grow mushrooms by themselves. Like you were saying, when you're mixing a little bit of straw in there, now you're putting a little bit more of that cellulose that they like to eat.
Here's what happened. The first time I did it, I just got a jar. I filled it up with coffee grinds with mushroom stems on the bottom, and it went to rot and nastiness and blue shit. And then so I was like, well, maybe I'm asking too much at once. So like I threw some stem cores down in the bottom of the jar, and I put like 2 tablespoons of coffee grinds.
Yep.
And once it colonized, I added like 2 more. And I did that till the jar was full. Then I'm like, ooh! So then I mixed that into like 5 pounds of coffee grinds, put it in a bag, and it turned into mush and nastiness. So I was like, okay, I'm asking too much. And when I started amending with a mix of wood, basically sawdust, pellets, and straw, all of a sudden, now I would say maybe I have 1 block out of 20 get contaminated.
Yep.
And I'm doing the same half-ass sanitation. It's a half-ass, I'll admit it, but I think it's just that when you give it that much nitrogen, you're asking too much out of that mushroom, I think.
Well, so mushrooms are, the way I break it down in my own head, this is not terminology used by the industry, but mushrooms are a velocity organism. They need time to build velocity. They need to be able to build up speed to get going. Whereas mold's ready to go. Bacteria is ready to rock and roll. So if you're trying to win, if you throw a bunch of things in a bag and you're hoping the mycelium's going to win the speed game, it's just not. It's never going to win the speed game. What it will do, if you, like you were talking about, where you fed it like a couple of tablespoons, let it grow, fed it a couple of tablespoons, you basically were giving it just enough food. It could use its own velocity to move through that. And I remember in the episode I was listening to last night, you were talking about how it started eating it faster and faster and faster the more it built up. Yeah, the more biomass it gets behind it, the more velocity it gets. And so that's kind of what you're doing, is you start off feeding it small, the small amounts of nitrogen. But also, if you give mushrooms too much nitrogen, they kind of just sit there and they go, I've got everything I need. Why should I reproduce? My life's really good. Whereas what we like to do as mushroom farmers is find a recipe that we can put just enough nitrogen in that it eats it up really quickly. And then it goes, oh my goodness,
I'm out of stuff.
I'm out of stuff. I guess I better reproduce. And it's just enough of a stressor to get it to really reproduce. That's why, like shiitake, people like to take the bag and slap it really hard. That's imitating a tree falling down.
Okay.
And the shiitake goes, oh, instead of fruiting a little bit here and there, I better flush really hard because this might be my last chance.
So there's a lot of parallels there with vegetation. Like if I want a tree to produce fruit early, I want to prune it heavy.
Yep.
So that and I make it feel that it's canopied, right? And I stress it a little bit. Or certain tubers like sweet potato, various sweet potatoes, if they don't get a little bit stressed, they won't set many tubers because it is the end of my life cycle that requires me to put out prodigy.
Right.
Because I don't think people get it. Like the real mushroom is all the part you don't see. It's all the mycelium. The fruiting body is just the reproductive method. So it's kind of going, I'm done. I got to go make more babies, right? That's what we're really going on there. So that's why, like when it consumes the log and the log is completely enveloped, that's when it's going to want a fruit.
Absolutely. Well, and it's oysters are hungry, which is one of the reasons why they fruit so fast, is because they typically deplete. They just move on and move and move and move. But you'll see this where oysters will consume an entire environment, and then once they're done, they start running out of water, they start running out of nitrogen, they start running out of space. They start flushing. Flushing is what we call when mushrooms, when the mycelium produces a mushroom. So they flush, and then they will typically, oysters will rapidly flush. So will lion's mane. So when the bag is at an end, they'll fruit, and then like 7 days later you're fruiting again, and then 7 days later you're fruiting again. And each flush, as it's running out of energy and water, gets progressively smaller. You're right.
Yeah.
And so, you were talking about waste materials though that we can grow on. I mean, you hit a bunch of them. Like I said, the biggest understanding is browns and greens, but I've seen people grow mushrooms on cardboard sandwich with coffee grounds for the nitrogen. Most mushrooms prefer a basic environment on the pH scale rather than acidic, and coffee's a little bit more acidic.
Yeah.
But I found like shiitake loves coffee grounds. They do not seem to be bothered by the slightly acidic environment. And so I've actually done that where a lot of times I'll take my coffee grounds and dump them in a bag, and then later on, like a bag like this, and then I might put sawdust on top of that, pressure cook it, and now I've got the addition of both in there. And I just basically dump the filter or the French press in there, depending on which coffee maker you're using. But I've used grass clippings. Back in the day, I literally took out my walk-behind push lawnmower, put the bag on there. I would collect the grass clippings. I would put them out to dry, and then I would use straw and grass clippings. And the grass clippings, because they were green and for the nitrogen. People grow on sawdust and alfalfa pellets. I know people that grow on rabbit food. I've personally, I didn't do this commercially, but just as a test, I did sawdust and dog food, and dog food is the nitrogen. And then when I did the calculations, actually, Meow Mix is probably the best nitrogen source by price per gram of protein.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't suggest using it, but in Europe, it's actually not uncommon for people to use fish meal for their nitrogen source. So mushrooms can grow on a wide variety of things.
And that's the smaller part of the material anyway. I mean,
it is, yeah.
You just see a bag of Meow Mix flushed out.
So there's a substrate type that was popularized by a guy named T.R. Davis called the Master's Mix, and it's 50% hardwood fuel pellets, 50% soybean hull pellets, just the outer coat of the soybean. And so when we did the Meow Mix, one of the guys in my Discord group that follows us started calling it the Meowster's Mix. So now that's the running joke, is this the Meowster's Mix.
I got my cat giving me side eye from the door over here to my office. What are you doing here with my food?
That's right.
I just think and I read a lot of Paul Stamenson's stuff, and he talks about this. Like, you should find those waste streams that exist already where you are, and then find the method or the mushroom or the mushrooms and methods that work with that waste stream, rather than try to create a waste stream that you're just creating a waste stream to create a waste stream.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I would do. So it's harder if you want to get into like producing 1,000 pounds a week. It's easier to build in a system where I'm buying pellets in and combining those. And so, but if you're doing it where you don't mind a little up and down as part of a market garden, logs are a great way to go. Waste resources are a great way to go, because what you're doing is you're taking trash or garbage or waste. Well, I guess waste is the better word than trash, but you've got that material that you can bring in and turn into soil and then turn into food. And I think the best case use for mushroom farms is to stay small to medium and pair up with market gardens. I would love that. I don't mind seeing centralized spawn production. Much the way I love microgreens. Microgreens in a city make perfect sense, because you can buy seed in from the rural area. And then grow a bunch of food right there fresh. Mushrooms are kind of similar. You can buy spawn in, and then you can grow mushrooms right there fresh in a massive amount in a very small space. And so, but then I think mushroom farms pairing up with market gardens creates that, it gets that cycle going where now my waste product is feeding into the market garden. Even if I wanted to add an extra step, I could take mushroom blocks, grow black soldier fly larvae on them, grow cordyceps mushrooms on those, which are an incredibly high value crop, and then take that waste resource and give it to the farmers. And now I've gotten 2 crops off my crop.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that market gardener is probably a good sales outlet for your product beyond what you can sell direct, right?
Absolutely.
Now you function stack in both directions. I can help sell your product. You help sell mine. My waste is your resource for fertility. I mean, like,
exactly.
There's a lot of value there. And I think there's another thing, like, just for normal people to tie into, even if you're not in this as a business, anybody that's growing enough mushrooms to actually have a business, even like a side hustle, small business of, like you're saying, like 500 pounds or whatever a week. Mm-hmm. That person, even if they have initially a way to harness all those blocks, they're going to get to a point where they have more than they can deal with.
Oh yeah, and it becomes a rat's nest.
Yeah, we have tons of people that have gone into our Telegram, like, I do this, and one guy lives in Philadelphia, and I think he's doing 200 blocks a week.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I built bioreactors, and I did this, and I'm selling company. I still have more than 100 blocks a week. I really, like, they're just laying in piles, and so he's giving them away. So and when they go commercial, a lot of these guys, they fruit once and then done, because they get in that production cycle and they want to know exactly how much they're harvesting when they're harvesting, and they've got it dialed in. And from an efficiency standpoint, they're doing 1 or 2 flushes and done. Well, like you said, that block can flush multiple times. So people are going and getting those blocks and just burying the whole block in their garden.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're getting flushes here and there, and that's still improving the soil. It's kind of a longer, like, time release formula into the soil.
And I think of them as soil batteries.
Yeah. So I'm saying, if you want to get into mushrooms and you don't really want to do the work, it makes a lot of sense. Just find out, are there small producers around you, and reach out to them. And what are you doing with your surplus blocks?
Oh, yeah.
Because most people doing this, at least on some level, have ideological drive. Like, we all want to make money. We all have to make money, or, you can't keep doing what you do.
Yeah.
But I find people that go into regen ag, mycology, aquaponics, hydroponics, aquaculture, all this whole realm, there's always a little bit of ideology there. So if they're like, well, if I can actually take my waste and turn it into something good, they want to do that. It's just not like when I was putting together stuff on the biochar, I was like figuring out ways to reach out to, like, cabinet makers and stuff for their scrap. And they kind of see it as, no, I don't have to deal with it. Somebody else comes and get it. So to them, it's just a mechanical thing, where the person that's maybe growing mushrooms or something, to them, it's also ideological, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that a lot. And it makes it difficult sometimes, because you want to be a good steward, right? Like, I don't, like, the way I would look at that, what you just described is, like, a lot of people who get into regen agriculture or even self-sufficiency is that they don't want to just make a living. They want to make a living while being a good steward. They don't want to have to trash the planet or their local ecosystem or even their own family to have to be able to make a living.
Yeah.
And that's something that we hold true to very much here. We had someone one time in the mushroom world to talk about growing mushrooms was the hardest thing that they've ever done, commercially, whatnot. And I agree that it can be stressful sometimes if you're doing it commercially. It's like any farming or crop like that. But the whole point of getting into this, in part, is to make our family life better, to make our communities better. It's not just to make a buck. Mushrooms are nice because they have an insane profit margin compared to other crops, and they get it really quickly, so they have a really fast ROI. But the real benefits to me, we talk about that a lot, where it's like, okay, the crop is nice, the money is nice, the mushrooms are great eating, but my favorite thing about mushrooms is the soil creation. I go out in these tubs that are out front, and I just dig into them, and I pull out, and it's just seething with life. I read wrigglers. I never need fish bait anymore. I go out there and I one hand into a tub, and I've got all the worms I could use all day. But praying mantises have been my childhood. We used to see them all the time. Nowadays, it's been harder and harder to see them. And this year, I don't remember how many we had, but like 13 or 14 of them we found out in the parking lot. Not to mention wasps and everything else that was brought here by the mushroom substrate mixed with the water. So it's I agree. I guess I say all of that just to say I agree with you that it's definitely what's nice about it is that I get to feel like a good steward, and I get to make a living, and I get to put shoes on my kids' feet and a roof over their heads, and I get to do both of those things.
And there is this like whole cascade of like symbiosis that sometimes doesn't always work out for you. Amy was just saying she tried to do a King Strophoria patch, and the chicken spent so much time in it she never got any mushrooms. And I relayed back to her in the chat, like I read one of Paul Stammen's books, and he was talking about how he had this big patch he cultivated for Strophoria, and he wasn't getting it. He was wondering what's going on. He's sitting out there watching it one day, and all these honeybees were coming in. And they're physically moving the wood chips, and they're harvesting the mycelium.
Oh yeah,
honeybees, like they're taking mycelium as a resource. And he decided that once he realized what was going on, well, that's not a problem.
Nope, that's not a problem.
That's not a problem at all. Like if that's what's going on, then they must need it, and eventually they will get what they need, and then maybe they'll stop taking it, or maybe they won't, and I'll grow something else. Like it was really an interesting thing to see that kind of trophic cascade that can occur. And, we talk about humans, and we're a keystone species.
Yep.
And then there's the very famous work they did in Yellowstone where literally the rivers changed course when they reintroduced the wolf, because the wolf was a keystone species. But sometimes keystone species is, you need a microscope to actually see it.
Yes, sometimes.
Maybe don't think fungi is a keystone species, doesn't know anything about fungi. I mean,
who's that?
you don't know your shrooms if you don't know that, right?
Right. Yeah, it's incredible. So when we start throwing these blocks out, we see bees. We actually have a hive that's in our building, and we thought about having it taken out, but it's in the warehouse so high up it doesn't bother anybody.
Yeah.
So we left the bees, and we started noticing them that they absolutely come to throwing out oyster blocks and everything else, and they will. Any disturbance, like if we bust a block or crack a block, they're in that. You can see them like pulling at the hyphal tips. What I found interesting was he was talking about as the mycelium tears, when they move those wood chips, it exudes little droplets of what we call soma or somatic fluid. But that's mineral rich, and the bees like just drink it up. And they think Paul is the one that put out the hypothesis that this may in part protect against like colony collapse, and it may help their immune systems the way mushrooms help our immune systems. And that the way we see this in nature is probably dead spars that bears come up. You know how bears will rip into logs to mark them and everything else. Well, that exposes mycelium, and bees in nature probably get exposure to that there. But if we can purposely feed them this, then, and so far their studies are showing and holding that it's protecting against colony collapse disorder and a bunch of other things. And so it's amazing how many things mushrooms provide that we probably don't even realize.
Yeah.
These services and chickens, I will say chickens love spent blocks. Part of it's probably because there's little pieces of grain left over, but I've seen them. They eat the mycelium chunks too. And ducks. I used to feed my ducks waste mushrooms out of the grow room. Like if they got too old, we'd throw them out, and we throw out a 5-gallon bucket of old mushrooms, and the ducks would tear those apart and eat them like they were candy.
I can attest to that because I throw it. Sometimes I'll just throw, like, especially if they get kind of gnarly looking, I'll just throw them in the compost pit that the ducks have access to. And some of those, it's not spent grain because the only thing in there is wood dust, or I'm sorry, sawdust. I guess the straw could have a little bit of grain bit in it, but
that's gonna be pretty minor.
Yeah, they're in there for that mycelium. And the book that I mentioned actually was written by Paul along with other authors. I've got it up on the screen right now. Growing Gourmet Medicinal Mushrooms.
That is a great book.
That was a fantastic book. I got the audio, and it was pretty freaking stellar to listen to.
I haven't got the audio one. I need to probably get that.
And now I'm actually wondering. No, this doesn't say audio. I wonder if I have the wrong book.
Well, you may. So Mycelium Running may be the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
So I will say, if you are a nature enthusiast or a person who wants to bring mushrooms into your environment, like your homestead or whatnot, doing low-tech stuff, Paul's book, Mycelium Running, is probably one of the best options for that. Because that was his book of basically how do we apply mycology to ecology. And that's kind of his newest work in that. You have Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms and the Mushroom Cultivator. In the mushroom world, we call that the Blue Book and the Black Book. those are some of the best for learning lab techniques and traditional farming practices. And if you want to have some real fun and you're not like too anti-AI, one of the coolest things in the world is to like go to like ChatGPT and feed it some of these old Japanese books that I can't read Japanese, but oh my goodness, the AI can translate Japanese super well. And reading some of these, like there's a manuscript that's like 2,000 years old on shiitake cultivation that you can read about. And they have, I mean, they had simple techniques back then, 2,000 years ago.
I had to go into my Audible account while you were there because that's why I couldn't find it on Amazon. It's through Amazon, but it was an Audible. It's Fantastic Fungi. Is the book I'm talking about.
Okay, that's by
it's listed. He's listed as the lead author on it, but basically every other art, like it's an article by Paul and then an article by somebody else, and then an article by Paul and then an article by somebody else.
I think that's probably related to the film Fantastic Fungi.
It is. It is absolutely. I'm going to get it up on the screen for everybody here in just a second, and I'll add that link because that's where I learned about the bees eating the mycelium, and I mean, if Paul Stamets says something, I don't even question it, but I would have never guessed that. That was pretty. This book and about the second half of it really goes deep into the medicinal, including the psychoactive, like hallucinogenics and things like that, in ways that I had no idea that they're being used. Like these people are taking like a mega dose of psilocybin, but they're only doing it like two times ever. Right. And they're having these guides that they get very comfortable with before they do it so that they're there and they trust them through the experience. And some of it are people dealing with PTSD and stuff like that. They do this twice and then they're, I don't want to say cured, but their problem is mitigated to the point they don't need drugs. Right?
Yeah, that's incredible.
That's as cured as you get today. But some of these people are people that like there's nothing can be done. They're terminally ill, but the level of acceptance that they come to with that and the level of like, the way they are then able to adapt to an unchangeable reality is completely transformed.
Yeah. So we do mentorships here. We do like week-long mentorships, or at least we have done in the past. I think this year we're just doing the online side, but the week-long mentorships, I think about half of those that we've had come through are police officers, former soldiers, former Marines, people that have come in and been like, I'm interested in mushrooms because I took one dose and I don't, my PTSD is manageable. It's become like, it was so life-changing. And I'm probably weird for my generation of mushroom guys. Like it's more common now, thankfully, because of people like Paul Stamets and others.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that we've had come in and say that it's been life-changing is great. The way I'm weird is that it comes in. I came into gourmet first. Most of the guys that are mushroom YouTubers like me or any of the other guys that are what we consider the same generation. I got into mushrooms around 2008, 9. Okay. I started my business in 2013. And that generation was almost all people got into psychedelics. Then they got into mushrooms. And I got into gourmet and I didn't try psychedelics for a couple of years because, I don't really mess with them now, but I was having cluster headaches.
Okay.
So multiple times a day. And to the point that, my wife, I would just curl up in a ball and start crying. Just, I couldn't even think. It was like loud noises and light. And my wife was like, we've tried all of these things. The doctors are trying all this stuff. I personally, it was the only time in my life I've really had suicidal thoughts and things. And I was in a bad way. And she's like, I found this one study. I think it was by Harvard or somewhere. And she, or the Mayo Clinic or something. Anyways, she was like, let's just try it. People are talking about one dose and they don't ever have it. I took one dose.
Wow.
And then I didn't have the next day, not a single cluster headache. For a year, no cluster headaches. Years later now, no cluster headaches. Like it overnight reverted for me. And I'm not saying mushrooms are any kind of cure, but that was my personal experience.
Yeah.
And I was not interested. To me, the psychedelic side of mushrooms is the least interesting side of mushrooms.
Okay.
Even though it's still a side of mushrooms. It's still interesting. It's just I get so much more work. Like I get excited about the ecosystem building, the genetic preservation. I love breeding mushrooms. It was such a big thing whenever I started. I remember sitting at the farmer's market and the guy next to me had like 50 different types of tomatoes.
Yeah.
That all look like different species. And he's grown one species that looked like amazing things. And I was growing to have 5 radically different looking things. I had 5 mushrooms, the species. So that's why I started breeding oysters. Cause I was like, once I got into that, I started seeing the proliferation of different types, like mushrooms with the big fat stems, the oysters, mushrooms with little stems, ones that would grow in globes, some that would be flowery looking, some that would be what we call tuliped, where most people tell you to pick a mushroom and the cap is about to go flat. These mushrooms, they grow, they flip up, and then they grow even bigger. Yeah. And we call that tuliping. And so I just became really excited about that early on. So that's the kind of stuff that interested me first. But then I had that one experience with psychedelics and I was like, oh my gosh, okay. And then we started seeing people come in with PTSD, wanting to learn how to grow mushrooms. And that's when I was like, I just thought that was a party drug, Yeah. I didn't realize there was a medicinal side to it.
Yeah. And that's what really got me interested in the psychedelics is the way they're being used in, let's say, a clinical or purpose-driven way. Yep. Like just zoning out on basically nature's LSD does not really appeal to me. Like tripping balls for 24 hours once a week does not appeal to me. But the idea that when properly applied, and I've even read accounts of people like their problem wasn't like physical like yours or PTSD. They're just an asshole. They're just a friggin' asshole. They're an asshole to everybody they meet all the time. And they go through this once or twice and they stop being an asshole. So okay, so mushrooms actually cure being an asshole for some people anyway. And that's pretty phenomenal. Maybe that's not as impressive as curing cancer, but we probably have more assholes than people with, life risky cancer. So maybe it's more applicable. I don't know. Like
more widely
maybe we
applicable.
Could make it like if you become a politician, once you get elected, you have to have a psilocybin
you have to open your mind
or something, right? My first really exposure to understanding what it was like for people to do it was actually listening to Paul on Joe Rogan talk about the first time he ever. No, it wasn't him. It was Randall. Was it Randall? No, it was Paul.
Okay.
No, it was Randall Carlson. Randall Carlson got a hold of some psilocybin mushrooms. I think it was Randall. Or I can't remember now. I can't remember which one the hell it is.
I didn't know Randall had talked about this. So
Randall talked about it, but now I'm back to I think it was Paul that actually told this story where he got this bag of them and didn't know what they were, and instead of using them, just ate them all. And he ended up, it sounded like the scene in Forrest Gump where Lieutenant Dan is up on the mast of the ship.
Oh, he's on the tree?
He's up in the tree screaming at the storm and feeling like his hair stand up on his arm and he's not sure if it's the hallucination or it's actually static doing it. And he had this, somebody tell me which one, because that was driving me nuts.
That was Paul.
Okay. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. But then he was like, okay, but then this became my thing. That's the thing that I'm going to do now with my life. Right. And to be that transformative, I'm like, well, I'm not going to eat a bag and climb up a tree in a thunderstorm, but I'm now open to this in a different way because I see a different application than, some dude going, woo, Friday night. No, that's not me.
Well, a lot of people don't realize Paul was a logger. And because he was kind of driftless directionless and drifting through life. They got this logging job, and I think they had the machine that moves the logs on the cable snapped, and the logs started coming downhill, and he hid behind one of these old growth trees, and that was one part of his oh my gosh, I just got saved by this tree, and he felt kind of bad. So that was kind of I think his eye-opening event to being a naturalist, which then led him to go into the naturalist circles, which led to him getting the mushrooms, which led to him riding a tree through a thunderstorm.
Okay. That's actually I was similar to Bill Mollison's background. Bill was worked cutting down trees.
Okay. And I love Bill. Bill and is it Dave Holmgren that are the two?
David Holmgren, yeah. Bill
I
said one of
like both
his
of those.
epiphanies was he was sitting around with all these guys talking to all his fellow coworkers and realized they were cutting down all these trees, and not a single member on that crew was ever going to earn enough money to ever buy a house that these trees were being built out of, that they were being tasked with cutting down in the middle of the forest.
Huh.
And there was a certain imbalance in that. It was just like, this doesn't make any sense as a human being anymore. Like I got to figure out something to do about this. And that was his famous come back and fight the bastards speech, where he was like, I figured I could just go live in the woods and stay there for the rest of my life, or I could come back and fight the bastards so they don't roll over everything. And
I dig it. I love it.
It's interesting to hear these similar background stories. I didn't know that Paul was a logger. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how often this happens, where I feel like a lot of naturalists have an awakening moment like that, where they kind of get violently shaken with a realization for a second, like, oh, this is not tenable as human beings. Or in the case of Bill Mollison there, I almost feel like he's going, this is a dehumanizing aspect. That's one of the things I love about permaculture is permaculture is trying to introduce humanity back to humanity, right? Like that's kind of the ultimate goal, is it wants to provide for humanity. It wants to be good stewards of the environment we live in. That was one of the things that brought me to it. And I love it, is that, it's so much of our society, you have to take personal responsibility for your own humanity at this point. I'm going to be human. I'm going to do human things, because the society makes it easy to do dehumanizing things.
How fucked up is it that you just said that and it makes sense? Humanity has to choose to be human, right? Or something like that is the way you put it. Like, we have to choose. A human has to choose humanity at this point. Like,
yeah, we have to be responsible for it. It's one of the beauties of capitalism, I guess, is that it allowed us to make a lot more of our own personal choices. But the problem with that is that it opens up a lot of people to making easy choices, which are dehumanizing. And just like you have to take personal responsibility for your retirement, you have to take personal responsibility for just being human.
For your humanity, right? Maybe we could be helped out too with the psilocybin for politicians. What is this guy? This needs to be a T-shirt. Right here. Rockley said, "Force feed politicians magic mushrooms." Right? Like,
so I could totally see an icon of that. Yeah, I could see like a little logo.
Your freshman congressman briefing here. Go in that room. Why? Oh, you're going to need the help that's in that room in a few minutes. Like,
there you go.
15 minutes from now, you're going to want help. Just go in there, sir, and we'll get you your other intro tomorrow. This is your first day. Right?
Your first day is having the universe dissolved around you. I like it.
Well, part of it is the feeling of separation, right? Like, I can do this evil thing to these people over there because I'm not connected to them.
Right.
And I think that's a big takeaway that I've gotten. Like, we're all connected in some way. It doesn't mean that everybody gets to do everything they want, but we also have to think about our actions with a little Machiavelli thrown in to stay sane.
Right.
We have to have like both of the side, like the yin and the yang, for that to be sane, because you can't just let everybody do everything, because there's people that will do bad things. But thinking, it's seventh generational thinking, is just a different way of coming at it. Like, what will this mean to my great grandchild? I will never know. Like, do we even ask that question anymore? I don't think we do enough.
No, I don't think we do. I don't think we do.
You have a thing called mycologium project?
Mycologium.
Mycologium. I knew I wouldn't get it right. Mycologium project. Now I read it and I see it that way. Yeah, that's what it says. You spelled it right. I'd let you know that. Anyway, it aims to preserve fungal biodiversity. Can we kind of talk about that? Because I think that's something that people don't get. Like, mushrooms don't seem in any way at risk, because you can pretty much order anything you want online and they'll send you, a block or a culture or a dowel or something with that much. But that's not in of itself diversity, because like the first question you asked me about the blue oysters I grow, who straight, where'd you get it?
Yeah.
Because I might get blue oyster from you and blue oyster from Olga and then blue oyster from Northsport, and there's genetic diversity just in that. And that's even commercial produced spawn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it didn't even used to be that diverse. When I first started, you could get a blue from Amasil and a blue from Lambert's and maybe a blue from one of the other larger companies.
Okay.
And those three were almost identical, I tended to go with Lambert's because I felt like their mushrooms were a little slightly better quality, even though like Amasil had like the better heat resistance, it thrived in heat. And so you saw differences, even though there were only like 3 choices. But now you're starting to see people breed mushrooms more and more, which is creating more and more different, unique traits that we can work with. And one of the things I'm going for right now, the southern mushroom grower in the United States is horrendously neglected. Mushroom cultivation tends to happen in the higher temperate regions, so like Pennsylvania and the Pacific Northwest. So one of the things we're after is we go down to like Florida and other places and we collect wild mushrooms. We have people send us mushrooms in that we clone. In fact, one of the things about our program is if they clone it and send it to us, we send them a strain of their choosing from our library. If they send us the mushroom, we'll try to clone it. And if we can get it clean, we'll send them a plate back. And then they can choose to do with it as they will. They'll have a cleaned up culture. And then that allows us to bring that stuff in our library and put that into our breeding program, but also to preserve it in long-term cold storage. I feel like the importance about this is not that mushrooms themselves, like I said, I don't think they're in any danger. They love disturbance. If we wiped ourselves out, they would probably enjoy the disturbance for a little while. And then they'd go back to doing the same thing that they've been doing.
Yeah.
What I'm more concerned with is that there's all these strands out there like heat resistance, better texture, but even old growth forests. And a lot of there's still a lot of privately owned old growth forests like around here, but it's hard to get access to. But there you find what are called polypores. Think a shelf with, instead of gills, it's got little holes in the bottom.
Gotcha.
That's a polypore. They've been incredibly important to humanity. There are fleshy polypores that you're familiar with that you talked about earlier, like chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, some of the most delectable mushrooms to eat.
Yeah.
But then you've got mushrooms like the horse's hoof, which is the Fomitopsis, which is basically it's harder than the tree it grows on.
Like a shelf fungi.
Exactly, it's a shelf fungi. Most of these polypores are shelf fungi. They are some of the most medicinally active mushrooms that we have. Against Paul's done a little bit of studies in this, so have some others. Incredible antivirals, incredible antifungals, bacterials, etc. So he's trying to make the case that, hey, Department of Defense, if you want the best antivirals to protect us against, these genetically engineered pathogens or whatever, the old growth forest may be important to the Department of Defense. So maybe we should save some of that. So like today, or right now we have what I call the Turkey Island perfume polypore, TIPP on the plates. That plate, I just picked this mushroom. It was a polypore. I still have not identified what species it is. I'm working on getting it DNA tested. And it grows on this plate to the extent that even with the plate wrapped and closed, if you wave it anywhere near your face, it smells kind of like a perfume mixed with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which is weird. And then if you open that plate in front of the flow hood, so right behind me, there's a filter way up there that you can't see. That's where the air goes into the lab, and then the air recirculates all through this room and through our offices. If I open that up right there, I'd be smelling it right here, because it's just a tiny little plate can produce that much of the active molecule. We don't know what that molecule is. That may only be useful. Maybe it'll be great for perfumes. I don't know. Yeah. But that's the kind of stuff that we're working with. Like, polypores are seen as a pest by the forestry industry. They are not seen as the biomolecular marvels that they are.
Sure.
They are I like to think of it like this. Humanity is part of the animal and mammalia kingdom. Animals went mechanical. We are great mechanical things. We move mechanically. We've got all of this cool filters and membranes inside of us. The skin itself is a mechanical filter. We have all of this stuff working, but it's almost all mechanical. We have a lot of biochemical, but mushrooms went, screw it. I'm going to have one of the simplest body plans there is, and then I'm going to go hardcore into chemical adaptation. So they have all these switches inside them that are called enzyme pathways that they can turn on and off. And you feed them a certain feedstock, and that'll turn on a gene, which then allows them to produce a different feedstock. We found a mushroom here recently that is responsible. Like, if you feed it a certain feedstock, it'll produce vanillin, which is the precursor to making like vanilla extract and things like that. So and we're just barely scratching the surface. So that's why I think biodiversity is so important. It's not necessarily so important to the mushrooms, though I'm sure that they enjoy it, because I don't think they're going anywhere. But to us, that stuff's incredibly useful, and we're just cutting down its environment and just going, throw it up, don't give a care. So what we actually try to do is we try to find places that are slated for clear cutting for housing developments, things like that, and we go and we collect everything we can find, bring it back, and then put it back. Right now, though, I mean, we focus on things that we know are directly useful to humanity, but right now we have somewhere around 600 approaching 700 strains in our cold storage library. And that's basically the work that we're doing there. But we try to get people to. We've had people send us stuff from Mongolia, Australia, Austria, Israel. I'm looking for some inroads into South America, but also we have people all from across the United States that send us stuff.
Very, very cool. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that people getting started with mushrooms make? Newcomers make?
One of the most common is probably overthinking it. We see a lot of people that get into it and they've heard all the what I'll call propaganda of it's got to be just so.
Okay.
And I almost feel like that's propaganda to keep people out of producing mushrooms.
Gilding out, yeah.
Yeah. Again, you do have to be careful at certain states. And one of the reasons probably to give them an argument in good faith is that they're probably going, everything I do in the laboratory gets magnified 100-fold. So it's, you have to get it right so that when I put it in, if I put this bag of spawn that cost me $3 to make, and I put that into 100 blocks that cost me $5 to make, that's a $500 mistake if I get that wrong.
Okay.
Whereas if I'm growing at home, I don't have to take that level of care. That's probably the biggest thing, is that people get intimidated out of growing mushrooms. And I don't think that should be the case. I think people should be encouraged to grow mushrooms safely. But the biggest safety concern really is to your home and lungs. And that's just don't fruit massive amounts of oyster mushrooms in your home.
Indoors, yeah.
Yeah. If you do it inside, vent it out a window and have a fan constantly running on low, and that'll bring spores, just a negative pressure out the window.
Yeah.
That's the way we did in our basement farm. And then we went from producing, a block a week to 1,000 pounds a week out of our basement. So
I do that all summer, fall, spring long. And in winter, I just put microfilters over the exhaust fan for the Martha tent. And then about once every 2 weeks, I replace those.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't grow that much anyway.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is, if you're growing a little, just enough for home use.
I'm growing like 6 to 8 blocks at any given time.
Yeah, the filters are great for that.
Yeah.
Like if I was trying to, my grow room's like it's a 12 by 20 foot grow room. It can hold somewhere close to 800 blocks at a time.
Yeah, no,
I've got that thing jam packed, and I try to filter that. Every 5 minutes. But
that tracks. That makes perfect.
But for home use, I think that's the best way to handle it. Especially if you're trying to save energy during an extreme weather month like heat or cold,
or just like 6 months out of the year.
Yep. Fair enough. I live in Tennessee. We get 4 seasons a day. So
we didn't this year. This year we had a pretty mild beginning to summer. It got pretty brutal by the end, but there's years where we definitely have triple-digit days in April, and we absolutely will have triple-digit days in September.
Gotcha.
And October will average highs in the 90s. That's when I say 6 months, I'm not freaking kidding. That's when we're. And the other thing is Pennsylvania, midsummer, like July, you get a day at 98, 99. Every once in a while you break 100, but let's say 7 o'clock at night, the sun starts to crest and the temperature plummets.
Right.
Here it freaking keeps going up until 9:30 at night. And it's freaking, if it's 104 during the day, it's 98 at midnight.
Right. Hey, Jack, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I apologize.
No problem. Our guest is taking a brief momentary break. If you're on audio only, I will edit this out for you. Everybody else, you'll just have to wait with me. Everybody's got a dog problem. Guys, what I will do is say right now, if you have questions, I only have 4 people with starred questions or comments. for our guest to comment on at the end. If you have anything else for Andrew, now would be a good time to get them into the live stream comments. Please put the word question or comment in all caps, and if you do that, if he comes back, we'll get you an answer at the end. And yeah, he has returned.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I had some fun with it. Anyway, and you won't find out what it is till later. Anyway, is there anything else you want to add to like mistakes people make when they're getting started before we kind of move on and wrap up?
You know, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure I hit the button. Sometimes I hit it and it doesn't work well. Yeah. So as far as mistakes go, like I said, overthinking and getting intimidated out of it is one of the biggest ones. But I mean, be willing to fail forward. One of the big mistakes is that everyone tries to get it right all the time. And as I said earlier, like, you know, I'll use this as an example. One time there's this guy, he was really proud. He was showing his blocks off on a Facebook mushroom post. And someone went in there and was like, what's that spot of green? You know? And there's a little bit of contamination. And one of the biggest growers I know got on there and was like, dude, if you're not seeing contamination daily, you're not growing enough. And I think that that's a good way to look at it is it's okay to fail. It's okay to have those little failures. In fact, there's a reason why the term fail forward exists. So be willing to get in there, throw some shit at the wall, see what sticks, you know, see if it, see how well that kind of stuff works. It's cheaper than college. Failing forward is cheaper than college. So that's the two biggest things for me is that don't get intimidated out of it. And secondarily to that, be willing to get in there. And in fact, what I have found is some of the best stuff is when people tell me you can't do it that way. And I go, okay, I'm going to try it that way now. Now I'm going to test your hypothesis. So that's the biggest things I feel like.
I think that's true in a lot of disciplines. People that tell you what you can't do are generally wrong. And like, even if they're right, well, maybe you'll find out why you can't do it because they probably don't know. I've had people all the time tell me things with certainty and they can't explain the mechanism. So then I don't know where your certainty came from if you can't explain the mechanism of what you're sure about. Yeah. I think the most common mistake people probably make is you just wouldn't qualify the way I asked the question saying new growers. It's they don't ever try. Yeah, they look at all these informational channels, which can be really useful. But if they get too technical or too complex or too many, like, don't do this, don't do that, then what happens is a paralysis analysis comes in and I can't do this. And I think a lot of people would be surprised, like, how valuable it would be to them if they just realize, like, especially if you live in a climate where you can grow outdoors 6-8 months a year, just what you can do with, like, a couple spawn blocks and some 5-gallon buckets and some straw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the amount you can grow with that, if you can just like go to a shady spot behind your shop and hang these buckets up in a tree and let them grow, and keep them wet. I mean, like that simplicity, and then like maybe you'll worry a little bit less about being perfectly sterile when the bucket's going to go outside in nature anyway, right? Like,
well, and that's one of the big things we've seen, and it's one of the big jokes about amongst the mushroom farmers is, you might have a crop, you put an entire wall of mushroom blocks in, and you're going, you're waiting, and they won't fruit, and you're waiting, and it still won't fruit, and you just go screw it, and you throw it outside, and it goes out in the compost. All of a sudden, it starts fruiting like crazy. Right. Yeah. So like, it's like, oh, okay. So you'll do it outside, but in this carefully manicured environment I've produced for you, you won't do the job I'm trying to get you to do.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that because I saw this thing, like people have always said you can't do Strophoria in like a Martha tent because you put the block in there and it just doesn't. And this dude I saw in some mushroom forum somewhere, what he ended up doing, he used like a Rubbermaid tub and he built like soil layers in it and like just out of the garden, freaking roly-polies and all kinds of shit, and just threw it in there.
Yep.
And then he put down like a 5-pound block, and then wood chips on top of it, and went through that in his Martha tent, and it fruited like freaking crazy. He's got earwigs and roly-polies and shit jumping around in there. And that may not be good for your other stuff, but apparently that's what that mushroom has to have, that full ecosystem.
Wine cap in particular, King Stropharia, likes it likes like kind of ground-based substrates like that. But what I have found is if I try to grow wine cap in sterile grain spawn, I have a sterile culture and I have a sterile grain spawn, and I throw that culture in, and it'll grow great, and then it'll stop.
Yeah.
And then I have to go in there and I have to beat it up. I have to break it apart. It's almost like without stress, wine cap just stalls. And I think that having isopods in there, like you're talking about, little crustaceans, in there kind of eating at its edges a little bit, things it's got to compete with, give it enough stress that it's like, it's a brawler. Wine cap likes to brawl. And if you don't put it in an environment where it can brawl, it's not going to do well. That is kind of like how you hear like Joel Salatin talk about the pigness of a pig or the chickenness of a chicken. That's the wine capness of a wine cap, is that it's got to fight. It's got to fight to survive. And we have to imitate that by every few days when we're growing wine cap in sterile culture, we have to go in there and beat the crap out of it. It's the only way to put it. You have to go in there and bust the whole thing up.
It's everything occupies a niche, and some niches are not static. In fact, most natural niches are not static.
Yeah.
Where do you see mushroom cultivation heading over the next decade? And then maybe how do people that want to be small for-profit growers, like how do they position themselves with that in mind?
Okay, so kind of taking it backwards there a little bit, how people would want to position themselves, I feel like it's going to depend on their end goals a lot. And I'm sure people will probably get tired of me saying it depends to almost every question there ever is. But, if you're looking to make just a few $100s a month, then it's a lot easier to get away with a bunch of stuff. If you're trying to make mushrooms your livelihood and you're trying to make it to where, you're farming first and then homesteading second, then now a lot more of the rules of mushroom cultivation apply. But I have, as far as where the industry is going, I have a hope of where it's going, where I think and would like to see it go. And then I have, the the kind of fear of where it's going.
Gotcha.
So, well, the fear side we'll deal with it, which is I do not want to see just ever more massive mushroom farms. I would like to see mushrooms not treated so much like a commodity, but like the fresh produce that they are. So I would like to see decentralized production. Again, people's backyards, basement farms, farmers markets. One of my former students is he did my mentorship back in 2020. He now runs ET Fungi up in Oak Ridge, and he provides to a lot of restaurants. And then there's Misty Mountain Mushrooms, who provides to a lot of restaurants. And these are all restaurants that I used to do a lot more of when I was heavier into commercial production before I got into the genetics side of things. And these guys, there's probably room for another 2 or 3 mushroom farms.
Okay.
Josiah at ET is tripling his grow space. Both of these guys are making enough that they're hiring people. They're providing their own lifestyles, which means that a place like Knoxville is not a big city. It's the biggest city around here, but it's not a big city. And yet there's plenty of room for multiple farmers to be growing mushrooms, selling them to restaurants, farmers markets, whatever. That's what I want to see. I want to see that more and more. I want the decentralized production.
Yeah, I agree.
They're growing oysters too. Oysters and lion's mane, a little bit of chestnut mushrooms. Like if someone else wanted to get into Knoxville and they're going, well, I see these oyster farms here already, they can get into growing black poplar mushrooms or what's known as piapino. They can get into, I mean, there's so many different
fantastic mushroom, by the way. I'm addicted to those freaking things.
That's one of my favorites. That's one of my favorites. That one is a little trickier.
Yeah.
So what I typically suggest is if you're starting out, you get into oyster mushroom farming and then you start, cutting your teeth there. And then as these bigger guys like Josiah, who's got 3 12 by 20 grow rooms, as they grow and they see you move into the market, hopefully they move up in the industry like I've moved up. I moved up and I actually gave them restaurants. With Josiah, I was like, here's 3 restaurants this week. Here's 3 restaurants this week, over and over, so he could build his farm. But if I wanted to move up, I could have moved into shiitake. I could have moved into maitake. I could have moved into chestnut mushrooms, or I could have specialized into a slightly harder to grow, more expensive mushroom. And And I think that we can see that fragmentation develop in some of the larger cities. Like you've got Las Vegas, Portland, places like that. And I really hope that that's the one. I hope that's the future that we see, is perhaps even centralized spawn manufacturing, because that makes sense.
Yeah.
For because that takes big sterilizers, that takes staff that are highly trained, that takes a few different things to produce spawn on a big scale. But then you can take that economy of scale and make spawn cheaper to farmers, and then allow these decentralized farmers to do the fruiting. Kind of like what we talked about the microgreens, where the food can be grown fresh right there where it's going to be consumed. The commodity is the spawn, that kind of thing. And I feel like what I don't want to see is ever larger mushroom farms that are growing, like we have Monterey mushrooms here. They grow about 600 pounds a week of buttons, portobellos, and things like that. And then we have the ones up in Pennsylvania that we were talking about earlier, which will they produce even more than that. And that works because the distribution system can handle that type of mushroom.
Okay.
What's protecting us small farmers is that oysters don't handle 2 weeks in the distribution system.
Gotcha.
But one day someone's going to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
By following something like the Dutch flower industry.
Yeah.
And I would like to see decentralized farms already on the ground, ready for that fight.
Yeah.
Like why would I transport mushrooms 1,000 miles away if there's already a farmer growing it there for about as expensive as I can sell it? Because my mushrooms, when I was selling at $8 a pound to restaurants, I was only 30 cents more per pound than the distribution mushrooms.
Than Cisco or whoever.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. If that already exists and the quality is that much better, then the decentralized farms win.
I think the other thing that the small farms can leverage is, when you say oysters, there's a lot of people out there that would take that like saying potato chips or something. Like it's just a thing, right? When there is so much diversity in oysters.
Right.
So like one thing I've never seen, and even at like a Whole Foods or Central Market here in Dallas, is a golden oyster in a store. And I've looked, because if they're there, it's more mycelium for me to play with. So I would, even if I didn't want to eat mushrooms that week, I would buy them for basically just to harvest the stems and start making some cultures. And so like, to me, if I am especially like restaurants, I want to put something on my menu that somebody comes to my restaurant for that thing alone that they can't get anywhere else. Like when we were commercial with our ducks, we were selling to a restaurant called I Declare up in like the Plano area, and they did a duck confit, sweet potato chip with duck confit on it, and then one of our duck eggs sunny side up on the top of that.
Oh, that sounds
and
delicious.
We were selling them 80 dozen eggs a month from our little tiny small farm. So what that meant, though, is they were selling 80 dozen plates of that a month, or they wouldn't have kept buying the eggs.
Right.
And they would call us like, we need an extra 20 of this, 20. I ain't got it. I have to sell to my retail customers too. Like I don't have it. And so that one dish made them a place that people were going in to buy an $18 appetizer. Yep. So if you're selling to restaurants like that, and you can offer them something like a pink oyster or pink and golden oysters or something that they can make a showcase on an app, then it doesn't matter if they figure out how to make a blue oyster ship like a button mushroom. Absolutely. Because they can't do it with whatever you're doing. And I think that's always been the advantage of being small. That agility, right?
Yep. Agility, the ability to pivot is absolutely key. So kind of like what you were saying in there. One of my favorite things to do, well, thank you. Pink oysters are one that typically grows in the heat. You can grow, I've grown pink oysters down to 45 degrees. They grow really slow. You get the best color cold. Mushrooms are almost always better when they're grown cold, because they'll have a better texture and color. But what we do is, for pink oysters, we don't grow them commercially for the most part. Okay. But we do grow them once a year. And we start planting them 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. And then every chef when he in their box of mushrooms gets a free cluster of just blood red pinks.
Okay.
And we do that simply so that the restaurants can take photos for their Instagram. That's all we do that for.
Wow.
We give them the pinks just so that they can
Color,
absolutely.
when you prepare them, they always lose a lot of their color.
Oh, they absolutely do. So it's literally they could take out the box. They go, oh, look at this, click, and then that's it. But now they're going, hey, look at these mushrooms we've got from Mossy Creek Mushrooms. You know, so it kind of generated hype for us, especially in the early days. Because when I first started off, so this area was settled by the Scots Irish. They are a fungophobic people. They do that, like it's kind of like what you were talking about, where like their only taste may have ever been on a pizza half cooked or from a can and then thrown on a pizza. And routinely I'll get people who tell me they don't like mushrooms, and then we'll cook them up for us, like heavily sauteed caramelized onions, you know, throw that out there, and they're like, this is like meat. And I'm like, yeah it's kind of like meat. We call it fungal flesh. We are fungal flesh ranchers. We're not mushroom growers. We're fungal flesh ranchers. But the idea here is that actually I lost my train of thought. My ADHD kicked in. My bad.
Meat, fungi.
Oh man, I can't even remember what we were talking. Oh, we were talking about the restaurants and stuff.
The restaurants and the niches and staying agile against the centralized competitors.
Yeah, that's my bad. My ADHD. I felt the wave hit. It just clicked.
I will tell you that, like, I've always found pinks to not be the best culinary mushroom. You know, they're okay, but they're not super great until I started pickling them.
Yeah, pickling's great.
Pickled unlike the blues where the stems are really good, a pink stem is like a stick. Yep. So you cut those off, and the pink fans, and do them in a light pickle, like a 25% vinegar, not like a 1 to 3 instead of a 3 to 1, and then throw some hot peppers in there, and then they tend to keep that color a bit more. And we were playing around last year with a bunch of different ways to do appetizers with them, and like, so I think one of the ways you can leverage the restaurant industry is it's difficult with chefs. You have to make them think it's their idea.
A lot of times, yeah,
because they're kind of egotistical as a demographic. But if you can, like, hey, look, I made this and it's kind of good, but I bet you could do it better. If you go into a chef, you're like, you should do this. Then they're like, oh, fuck off, right? Like, it's just like, no, you don't tell me what to do. I went to culinary school. Like, I did this, but could you tell me how to make it better? And of course, then it's like an ego thing. Of course, I can make that better. And then they make it like, hey, wait a minute, right? And then I think that you mentioned microgreens. Like, the people that have the leverage into the upper scale restaurants you want to sell to are the local microgreen growers.
Yep.
And you know, I have a very good friend who's a member of our community, John Dowie, who does that up in New Hampshire, and like, he doesn't have any more bandwidth to produce anymore.
Yep.
But I guarantee you, as somebody that had a good catalog of mushrooms, went to him and said, how about I sell to you and you sell to your chefs, and you can add it to your catalog. Those guys are hustlers. He's going to be like, I already know he's doing it with like maple syrup and a few other things that he's doing that with, like stacking that, because I'm already in. And the best way to raise your revenue isn't to get another customer. It's to sell more to your customer base.
Yeah. Upsell.
Yeah.
So 2 things. My favorite way to consume pinks is to pick them out in the grow room when they're prime and in the best color you're going to see. Okay. Run to the dehydrator so they don't go bad. Dehydrate them at about 115 degrees Fahrenheit for a few hours. Take that, powder it, and then add spices, a little sugar, things like that, and make a pork rub. And then smoke a brisket or a picnic
pork shoulder or something.
Yeah, exactly. Picnic roast, whatever you're doing, just slather that. Molasses is a great base to slather, and that stuff. Oh, I do that with so many different types of mushrooms. I make a meat rub with it. Steak, I'll make a salt crust, and then at the very end, I'll throw a golden enoki mushroom powder on it. Whenever because I like to add vinegar at the very end oh crap, what do they call that? Where you're pulling all the when you use wine at the very end to get all that glaze. I forgot the name of the process, but anyways, the whole point is that's the way I love growing pinks or consuming pinks. In fact, that's probably one of my favorite ways. I like processed mushrooms, probably more than I like fresh mushrooms. I like
another value add product, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Everybody does everything with freaking what do you call on it now? Truffle. Everything's truffle oil, truffle butter, truffle mac and cheese. There's more than one kind of mushroom, guys. I mean, I'm not dissing truffle. I like truffle oil. I do, but it's that's just another way we could use this is infusing. Like I do mushroom salt too.
Yep.
I'll do that with just like, okay, I got a bunch of I can't use it all. Screw it.
Oh,
like you said, all of the dehydrator in the spice grinder, and then like a 50-50 mix with a good like Redmond salt, and now you've got a mushroom salt.
Oh my god! And if you smoke that mushroom salt, it's even better. Another thing I like to do for anybody that likes to brew, like I love to brew at home. So I don't actually consume. I don't actually like consuming alcohol very much. I know I'm kind of weird for that, but I love making alcohol. Maybe it's my Scots Irish roots. I love the process more than I like the actual product. But I make this what we call the forest dweller's mead, and I take honey and water and yeast and raisins like I would normally do to make a mead, but I add 5 different types of mushrooms to it. I add a heavy amount of garlic and onion, and then I ferment that until it is clarified. And that is not a drinking mead. I use that only for cooking and deglazing pans.
Okay.
Because it adds so much mouthfeel, so much of that umami from the mushrooms, and then from the garlic. And there's every now and then I'll take a nip of it. Samantha won't come anywhere close to me if I do because it's so much garlic. But yeah, but it is one of my favorite things in the world to produce. Is that I guess they call that a methglin, which is like a honey wine that's made with herbs and stuff like spices.
Yeah, the methglin.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And I love that. I absolutely love that. That's the best thing. But the cool thing is if you do get into like mushroom culture from like a laboratory perspective, even a small scale stuff, it opens up so much stuff. I collect wild yeast from blackberries and I brew different wines and things like that. I brew a beet wine with a blackberry sours yeast that I got off a wild blackberry because you have that skill set already. If you can grow mushrooms,
it makes sense.
Yeah. Koji's a great one.
Koji,
eventually, antibiotics. I can grow koji on agar. I can store the cultures long term. I can make my own koji spores. I've got incubators and everything I need to process equipment. Like getting into mushrooms is like super awesome because you get giant autoclaves, giant pressure cookers to can with, and then you get incubators to put koji in, and then you get all this.
You already got it. And then just the general knowledge. Like there's so much overlap here between like making meads and wines and beers, especially traditional wild yeast, lambics and stuff like that. And then you get into the world of fermented food, and then you get into the world of mushroom. And like as you do these different disciplines, you see like the pattern recognition is what I call it over and over again. And,
oh yeah, absolutely. That skill set feeds into another.
If we could, let's blow through some Q&A real quick so I let you go. It's been like 2 hours. I didn't even realize that until my wife's like, yeah, I got to go. I'm like, oh. Okay. All right. Let's start off with Zoom V's. Will this guy be willing to take on a student? I don't know about that, like a permanent one or anything. You do some educational stuff though, right?
Well, so we have mentorships. So we absolutely, we do online mentorships. If you go to our website, it's under the Learn tab on online mentorships. And that's classes. We have a class pass where you can purchase to do every class for the month, or you can do classes picked out based on topics. Like in February, we've got February 7th, we've got a class on extracts. So how to make extracts from the cordyceps and lion's mane and things like that you grow. There's there. And then we have, a bunch of other stuff. We're gonna have one with gardening for mushrooms, I think in June. We're about to start up a mushroom club here locally where we're going to do free classes once a month in person. And we're going to do that at our farm and at ET Fungi. Misty Mountain just told me that they're wanting to do that. Unfortunately, everything mushrooms just closed. So there's all of that as well. So we absolutely do take on students. We do consultation for people that want to hire us for that. And then I have resources if people want to go spend a week at a mushroom farm. Mine's not really a good choice for that unless you want to do the whole system that we do of aquatic plants, mushrooms, lab work, plant tissue culture. We do a lot of plant tissue culture because that's once you learn mushroom culture, plant tissue culture is another skill that's the same thing basically. So we do all of that stuff and we do absolutely teach. But If you want to learn like commercial mushroom farming, I even have a couple of students that now teach the week-long week-long in-person mentorships.
Cool.
So.
All right, we're going to combine this to 2 questions into one because it's basically the same answer from the same person. Bruce says, what are mushroom blocks and what is mushroom spawn? So one's a type of the other, basically.
Yeah, so it's basically the same thing-ish. The main thing is that it is oftentimes what we're talking about a block is something like this. It's just a bag of sterile substrate that's had the culture added to it. This block could be fruited, in which case it's called a block. If its intention is to use it as spawn, that means to make more of these. I can take this and kind of like a potato, when you're trying to grow potatoes, you can take a potato, cut it up, and grow more potatoes. I can take this bag, bust it up, pour that into other bags like this in a sterile work area. And now I can make, I think our ratio is somewhere we can do 50 10-pound blocks with this one 5-pound block if our sterility is good. So that's basically the differences. A block is typically what you're thinking of as fruiting substrate, and spawn is an expansion substrate. But the funny thing is the terminology is kind of
redundant, sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is, because it could be grain spawn, or it could be,
it could be sawdust spawn, grain spawn. You can fruit
block
off spawn,
right?
Yeah.
Block
pinch up, use the
is
fruit
a
block
type of spawn that doesn't necessarily have to be expanded. It could just be fruited.
Say it again.
I said block is a kind of spawn that doesn't necessarily have to be expanded or inoculated into something else. It could be directly fruited. Exactly. And some mushrooms work, but like that's not going to work for Strophoria. Though you can buy a block of Strophoria spawn, you're gonna have to put it out somewhere. But like oyster, shiitake,
enoki,
lion's mane, pioppino, like I throw those in my tent. They fruit right off the block.
Yep.
And I'll get 2-3 flushes, and then the block goes either at compost, ducks, or garden, depending on what it is and what time of year it is too. They also, I'll tell you another thing, like they're free of worms. Like when we have like this time of year, the worm farm is like the best place for a spent block to go, because the worms don't care. They like that it's cold in the garage. They're happy. And when you put, that's funny too. I have like a 10 tray stack or an 8 tray stack worm farm. And mostly that's coffee and other scraps and whatever, like, okay, they need some, throw some stuff in there. When I start this time of year, and I start throwing mushroom spawn in there, the population
goes crazy.
Oh, it's nuts.
Yeah.
It's insane. And they're just a lot more, they just move faster, I guess is the way I would put it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's keep going quick here.
What's fun too, real quick, is that growing, like during the summer, I do black soldier fly larvae, and in the wintertime, I do red wrigglers.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I found a puffball. It's 22 inches wide on the edge of the hayfield. I left it alone to do its thing. Should I have done something else to help it propagate better?
So what I would have done, if you wanted to if your goal was just to try to maximize the colony, I would have waited till it started to get to where it's a puff ball, right?
Yeah.
At the first, they're just good eating.
Yeah.
But eventually the inside will turn to the dusty spore surface. We used to take puffballs as kids and throw them at each other.
Right.
And then my family used to say, don't do that. They'll make you go blind. So when their parents weren't looking, we'd throw puffballs at each other more.
Yeah.
That puff is spores. So you can take that and literally just, I don't know, ride a 4-wheeler around the field and sit there and puff it out. You want to spread that to its environment, and spores are the best way to spread that to its environment, is to maximize that. Get it up high and, get it where it's going to drop all those spores out.
We used to
Colin!
We used to throw them at each other too, but the other thing we should do is usually they get that hole right in the center where it all comes out.
Yeah.
So if you're careful about the way you step on it, you can like steer that and smash it down with your foot and like puff your buddy. Especially if you can get them to look down, then you can really get them with it. I think Paul wrote in one of his books that like his brother had, like, even your parents were not completely wrong. Like he or his brother has some eye problems to this day from
maybe we shouldn't have done that. We were just
landed,
we were just like, man, we can make my cousin go blind. Yeah, we'll do this, because I grew up on family land. I grew up with my grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all in the same land. So I mean, we were always fighting and throwing stuff at each other. And But yeah, that's a really good way to do it. Also, if you step on it and then let that cloud drift around your legs and stuff, every step you take, you're shedding puffball
spreading
spores.
more spores.
That's actually a trick that Paul Stamets talks about in Mycelium Running, is that he'll spore print clothing or a hat with strains that he likes or wants to spread, and then as he walks around, he's just shedding spores.
Yeah. Colin here, I think this question actually might be for me. Can you comment on your experience using spent blocks as biochar? I have never made biochar out of spent block.
He's talking to me. That's Colin watches my channel.
Unless you've done work with biochar, like that really wouldn't work because you've already broken down the carbon beyond where you want it for making good biochar. What I've done is I'll add maybe 10% biochar into my material that I make spawn blocks with. And then that biochar is being completely fully inoculated. It's also helping that block hold moisture because biochar will hold 7.5 times its weight in water. And then when I'm taking those blocks and composting them or putting them out in the garden, now I'm taking inoculated biochar and introducing it to the ecosystem. So I've never gone that other way of trying to turn like a spent block into biochar. And I wouldn't think you'd get great biochar that way.
So I've done it, and it actually works out pretty well. You're right that it does reduce some of the carbon load there.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it does do that you can see through the microscope is all that mycelium running through the sawdust creates more surface area.
Okay.
And so it actually allows for more microbes to exist on there. Now, I think that there's a good case to make both. And mushroom blocks are hard. They're like,
I was just saying, what's your process with that? Because it's not the ideal material for backyard biochar.
It's not. The way you have to do, we'll take a block, we spread them out on a surface, and then we crush the blocks and just let them sun dry. Once they're completely dry, we then throw them into. It's actually an old still that we ended up taking and converting to a pyrolyzer. So we just I'll throw that sawdust in there. But what I like to do is to take cords of firewood, like split firewood, set them in there, and then I'll throw sawdust chunks around those where they don't fit well, and then just set that in a fire and let it cook off. And then once that's done, you get the really nice charcoal lumps that you can either crush down to powder. We crush them down to powder a lot when we make soilless seed starting mixes.
Okay.
We'll put charcoal in that mix, and but we do it both ways.
You're breaking the blocks down to like a chunk size instead of a material like infinitely small material size, and you're carbonizing the chunk. And then crushing the chunk, which will then obviously crush really easily to a small particle size. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And so I like a mix. I like a lot of lump coal. I'll take the lump charcoal and I put it in the bottom of like our felt bags, buckets, things like that. Instead of rocks to allow drainage.
Yeah.
And then I'll on top of that we put it in our compost, and our compost has a lot of the powderized biochar.
I never thought of carbonizing the spent block, but now you're saying that, like, one of my little hacks, we make biochar in 55-gallon drums with like a side saddle cut in them.
You make a lot more than I do then.
So you can throw like 3-foot logs into a kiln that way, and especially a cone kiln on the side. But another little hack we do for smaller pieces of wood is we will use a Weber kettle grill, which I like to recommend because you can buy one for $25, almost brand new, on Facebook Marketplace anywhere in the country. And it's a cone kiln. It is literally, that's what it was designed after, is a Japanese style cone kiln. So you can make biochar in there. But what I've found is, like, right at the end of a burn, when you're kind of at the top and everything's carbonized and you have maybe an inch left of space, that's when you can take like a couple bucket loads of wood chips, one bucket at a time, spread them out, and they'll carbonize really, really fast because you've got so much thermal battery there. And I would bet that crumbled spawn block would work on that. Now, I'll tell you guys what doesn't work on that, and I totally thought it would, and it didn't. I tried it at Nicole's. She gets certain, like, sometimes she does coffee bean roasting, and she'll get rejects. So we thought we'd take a bucket of reject coffee beans and throw them on the top, and it would make coffee bean biochar. I don't know what about it. It just did not work.
Really? I would expect
like it just sat there and stunk. It just it never flared up. It never off gassed. It didn't do any of that. And Yeah. So
If you
that
don't
one,
dry out the mushroom blocks before you put the
yeah.
chunk
Oh, I would
in there,
definitely dry them out.
yeah,
But
because otherwise it takes forever. But it
yeah,
also stinks a lot more. It'll smell kind of like burnt hair if you
yeah.
cook it while it's wet.
I could dry them out here in about 5 minutes in July. Any
Oh.
suggestions on edible mushrooms for pine?
Yeah, so I actually have right now. Someone sent into the mycologium 3 oysters that were found on pine.
Okay.
And as far as like pine pellets, anything I grow can grow on the pine pellets or the hardwood fuel pellets.
Okay.
When the pelletization happens, a lot of the resins that are antifungal are squeezed out of the pine. So you can use the pine horse bedding pellets to grow mushrooms on if you wanted to. But as far as just like a pine log, most of what you're going to find edible mushroom wise won't grow on the pine wood so much as it's going to grow on the pine roots, and those are mostly mycorrhizal. One of my favorites, you see this a lot with white pine, is what are called slippery jacks. And slippery jacks are considered by most American foragers, they're kind of considered trash mushrooms. But in Eastern Europe, they're highly prized. They're also called chicken fat mushrooms because they kind of have the consistency of chicken fat. So Americans are oftentimes grossed out by it.
Yeah.
If you take those, slice them up, and dry them, it is the closest thing you can find to porcini powder without it being porcini powder. And they grow massive amounts of slippery jacks, even down south. I've found them from Florida all the way up north. So that's a good one. Are they
anything similar like what they call patty straw?
No, they're a bolete. So patty straw is a cap and gill, but that forms in the eggs and then pops out. These boletes are much more like, it looks like a stem and cap mushroom, but it's got all the pores in the cap rather than gills. And it tends to be thicker, and it's not, it likes to grow in like October around here. So pretty cool.
Okay.
So it'll grow in the
exact opposite. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
But that's going to be when I go into pine forest, for example, I'm not looking at the wood anymore. I'm looking at the ground. That's what I'm looking for is edible mushrooms that are on the ground. But pine is really like, hardwoods are going to be your best bet. Mixed hardwoods are always the easiest to grow on for what we want.
All right. Amy B says, what is your favorite way to incorporate mushrooms culinarily?
The meat rub is probably mine.
I was going to say, I bet you that's yours. I bet you that's yours.
Pickled. I like my mushrooms processed. To me, mushrooms are really cool crops for a couple of different reasons. One, they are the perfect factory farm organism. If you want to factory farm something, mushrooms are where you want to factory farm. I believe that factory farming is almost a sin to do with animal life for the most part, other than some fish. Fish like to be crowded, certain types of fish. But mushrooms are the perfect factory farm organism. I like that. When it comes to culinary stuff, I think their best bet is processed. I don't typically like to process food, right? I don't typically go for all the super processing of everything. But when it comes to mushrooms, they're perfect for processing. It makes them store longer, and they add so much flavor to whatever you're cooking. So typically like mushroom pickles, mushroom powders, mushroom salts, any way that I can get that flavor and get that mineral, vitamin, amino acid profile into my diet, that's the way I want to go. And I like them fresh too, but deep fried. There's a restaurant here called the Appalachian in Sevierville. Yeah. And they take an entire cluster of our King Blue, which are those big fat-stemmed oysters. They deep bread and then deep fry the whole cluster.
The whole thing. Oh, the whole thing. That.
And then they serve it as an appetizer with this like mayo, spicy mayo dipping sauce. Yeah, you just pull whole mushrooms off and you're dipping it. And
it's like a mushroom blooming onion from Outback, right?
Yes,
like,
I mean it's giving me cold chills thinking about how good that is. Like it hits
my
you right
arteries
back.
Are hardening. The mushrooms are good for that, so they counter it. It's neutral, right?
Right.
Like,
well, mushrooms can't be overcooked as long as you don't burn them.
That's there's a restaurant here called Lonesome Dove, run by a dude named Tim Love.
He's got one here. I've met Tim.
Oh, you know who Tim is. Then okay, so he's got a dish he does that's a riff off of a Scandinavian dish that they do at the holidays there. They do like a reindeer loin and lingonberry, and they use a golden mushroom. I can't remember what it is now.
Probably golden enoki.
No, it's something grows over there. I mean, golden in color, but it's not a morel. It's chanterelle. Chanterelle.
Oh, chanterelles, yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's like a certain thing that they do, and it's a big thing in Finland. You do this dinner once a year, like 2 weeks before Christmas or whatever. So he does this riff on it, he Americanized it, and he does like an elk loin instead of the reindeer loin, and he does candy grapes instead of lingonberries. But he did, instead of the mushrooms, the chanterelles, he does maitake, and he cooks those till they are like a potato chip.
Yeah,
And
I like it crispy.
Yeah, they're so frippin' good. There's your better half.
Yeah, she's gonna go pick up the
left
kids.
me for the day. Yours is coming to hang out.
But no, she's leaving now. She's gonna go pick up
so
the
we
kids.
both left us.
That's
We're
right.
bachelors for the rest
That's
of the
right.
night.
Left my own devices.
Answering that question for me, I'm with you on the umami bomb concept and intensifying the flavor. So like some of the things I can do is take like make a mushroom stock and then cook it way down to like a gastrique. And because I am a cook, like that's my, like I believe everybody should have certain goals in their life, and we should all have a mastery goal, and that mastery goal is only for us and our friends. It's not to make money on it. Mine is cooking. And so being able to do something like that and then lay that gastrique down underneath something like a piece of grilled pork.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's like a next level thing that you can do with mushrooms. Straight up cooking, lion's mane cut into strips, seasoned with Old Bay, which is like the classic seafood seasoning, and cooked down until it's firm. So you put weight on it and cook it down the way some people try to turn it into a steak. But go with the butter and the garlic, and like once you cook it down, then it'll take moisture back in, and you spoon that butter and garlic over it, and it'll pull that in. And I saw you put that in front of people, and they're like, "What is this?"
Yep.
It kind of, people say it tastes like crab. No, it doesn't, but it does.
It does, but it does. It's that's the problem with mushrooms. Are always going to taste like mushrooms.
Yeah.
That tastes like something else.
It tastes like crab meat the way that frog legs taste like chicken.
Right.
It's true, but it's not. And that's
the
best thing you can, if you haven't had it, that's the best way I can describe it. And
if mushrooms are so powerful chemically, it makes sense that they're going to play all kinds of interesting tricks on our taste buds. One of my favorites is like lion's mane. I like to take the powder, dry it at about 115 to 125.
Yeah.
And we've got a strain that we've been breeding that is such a high sugar profile that it turns golden brown once it's dried on the outside and sticky to the touch. You take that and you powder it. And then I love to make toast. And then I'll saute some shrimp in butter and some garlic and tarragon, things like that, like seafood stuff.
Yeah.
Just saute the shrimp really lightly, add some peas, and then pour that whole thing over toast, and then just sprinkle lion's mane powder over the top. And that whole thing just becomes an incredible seafood like profile.
Yeah. I mean, we've also done things like just to play with the fact that like the order something goes in an appetizer changes it. Like, so we'll take like the little crostini, and then maybe we'll do like a pickled pink mushroom on that. And then on top of that's like a little bit, like a little sliver of like a Roquefort blue cheese, and then like a drizzle of hot honey. And then that's an appetizer, right? But then you just flip that around and put the mushroom on the top of the blue cheese instead of the bottom. And the entire experience, like you make 3 appetizers with the exact same ingredients, and the layering is different, and piece to piece to piece, they taste different. And then you can get really funky and play around with like pair one with a port and one with a mead and one with a whiskey.
Yep.
Based on the flavor profile that you get by changing the arrangement, and it's all the same ingredients. And doing shit like that, that's why I say it's kind of like my mastery goal that's only for me and my friends.
That is what so I'm the same way. We've got our friend group, and we're all very close. We've started relationships, different skill sets and trading things, whatever. And that is when we all gather, I'm usually the cook. I'm almost always the cook, even if they all can cook and they're all good cooks.
Yeah.
My buddy Charles is a great baker. Ben makes some of the best stuff that comes out of crock pots I've ever had, like roasts and things like that. But if you want someone to cook and you don't know what the meal is going to be, I'm the guy to go to. So,
that's your guy. That's your guy. Crocs Broccoli says, white powdery mildew, how can that be dealt with naturally? I don't know about mushrooms. I mean, what we use for it is lab, which is like the way from when you make curd out of your milk to either make cheese or like I do that to make food for my fish. Like we have a lot of bluegill in some of our tanks, so we'll take milk and we'll curdle it and we'll throw the curds in, and the bluegill just tear it up, and then the lactobacillus that's along with that helps the health of the aquatic system. But then like that lab, we just might dump that all in there as well. But if you have a mildew problem in your garden, like a diluted spray of that usually knocks that down. But is there a mushroom thing for that?
There might be. I don't know. That would be more plant pathology, and that's I'm what you might call a white rot specialist, as much as there are specialists right now in mushrooms.
Yeah.
Like every specialist is still where we're so early in the mushroom process. I mean, I know guys who study, 2 or 3 molds and how they reproduce, and that's all they care about. Plant pathology is a whole. It's a whole section of knowledge that you would have to find probably a specialist in that.
I think there's a whole world of fungi inside of indigenous microorganism, Korean natural farming, KNF, and stuff like that. But it's not the kind of stuff we're talking about today. That's a Matt Powers thing. By the way, Matt's doing a great big seminar this week called Our Soil. Go there. I bet you somebody knows.
I bet somebody does know that. And I've been wanting to talk. Matt's been on my radar for a while. I've been meaning to. I had a chance to go speak at the same place he was speaking, and then I got sick about a year back, and I never got to go. And I've been wanting to meet Matt forever.
Okay, so you're getting 2 intros today. Then when this is done, Nicole Sauce and Matt Powers.
Okay,
works for me. I owe Matt some stuff for that seminar right now that it's done, but I got to get it over to him, and he needs it like yesterday. So I'm glad you reminded me of that.
There's a great book called Mycorrhizal Planet by Michael Phillips, and one of my big things, I wanted to meet him because he was talking about how important that is to orchards and stuff. Yeah, and he passed away before I got to meet him, and I was really upset about that. So I'm trying to meet everyone I can meet now.
And Matt's young and full of energy, so he should be around a while. He's an experienced man. He's the weirdness, but it's a good thing. Oh,
you see that a lot in mushrooms too. Mushrooms attract. Mushroom people are weird people. Yeah. Even me, I'm a very weird person.
His background is he was a professional musician and then a substitute teacher and then a charter school teacher and now a soil biologist, right? So you're going to get eclectic in that space.
Good. More eclectic better.
Rachel says, I got here late. Are there any that you would try growing in your garden with your veggies? I mean, Kingstrophoria, obviously. But I think the throwing mushroom blocks in the garden, and I even do that at the time of year where I know it's not going to do well here, because sometimes it does, because there's this big tomato plant and it's all shade. And then there's this little irrigation pipe going there and that microclimate. And so just if you're doing blocks, and I would say even if you're not doing what I'm doing where I'm actually fruiting blocks aren't that expensive to buy from providers, right? So
no,
go out and buy one of each of 5 different oyster mushrooms and just take the whole block and just bury it in your garden and it will fruit. And quite prolifically so. I've seen some examples.
Oh yeah. I gave a buddy of mine a wine cap block. It was only about 5 pounds.
Yeah.
That's the Kingstrophoria. And he planted that at his garden/forest edge. And then he just threw down more wood chips and leaf litter and things like that. And he had, I think he sent me pictures this past fall. And he's like, do you want any wine cap mushrooms? He said, because I stopped picking at 200 pounds. He's like, I've got 200 pounds of mushrooms growing in my forest right now. And I was like, are you, that's an extreme situation.
Yeah.
But I was like, no. And he's like, what should I do with all this? I was like, I don't know. Pickle it. I've never had that much wine cap.
Dehydrate.
Right. Then you have almond agaricus, which is a great mushroom to grow. I had friends that used to grow melons. They would sell hen melons at market. And so they would build these trellises and then straw beds underneath them. And they would plant almond agaricus under there because the almond agaricus is going to fruit right about the point that those cucumbers or melons are shading it perfectly and creating a humid dome. And they would sell the almond agaricus to restaurants for a good price and at market. And then they would take those hand melons that they're getting and they would chill them and sell them at the market with a little spoon for $5 a pop. And so they were they were making money hand over fist over one little system doing that at market.
That is creative.
Oh, it was super great. And they grew a fragrant melon that would attract people. He would cut that thing open and the smell would bring
I think I know what that is. They're like a kind of orangey, like a size of a big soft, like a little bit bigger than a softball.
Yeah, exactly. And he would just come up and he'd sit there and eat it in front of people. And then he would open up that ice chest and pull it out. And then he'd have mushrooms and other produce and that kind of stuff. But
those things were popular. If I remember the story behind them, they were popular in the Middle Ages because you carry them around with you because everybody stunk.
Yep. Yeah, that was actually, and they would rot and they would smell better as they rotted.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That was either medieval or Victorian era.
Yeah, something like that. I remember. I think it was. I read it in the dealer catalog known as Baker Creek.
I think they're literally called as perfume melons or
something like that.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
but those Almond agaricus and wine cap and then shiitake's a great one to grow outdoors.
Really? I guess on logs.
Yeah, on logs. A lot of people I know will do their logs, and once the log's fully inoculated, they'll plant that under their irrigation system. Or reishi's a great one to grow outdoors. You can literally inoculate reishi logs, what are called pony logs, the little shortcuts. Yeah. And then you bury those till only about that much is exposed.
Okay.
And then if you plant it in the shade and it's got good humidity, reishi will just grow. It loves ground contact.
Yeah.
Maitake can be done in pony logs. Chicken of the woods can. So those are all great outdoor mushrooms. Now, wine cap and almond agaricus are probably going to have longer seasons. You'll probably get more of that. But the logs are good self-contained units as well.
It would seem like when you're just talking about doing the reishi on like a log buried vertically and then just the top sticking out, it would seem that freaking oysters would kill that way too.
Oysters probably do. The only problem with growing oysters outdoors, and I don't even think this is a bad problem. You're familiar with the zones in permaculture?
Yeah.
I think oysters are a zone 1 log. If you grow them on logs outdoors, it's got to be out there where you pass by it every day because if oysters go
I agree.
overnight, they're going to have pleasing fungus beetles in them.
Yeah, they're going to go from they're not there to it's huge to their shit.
Yeah, in like 24 hours. Yeah, two
no, I since I started putting all the spawn into the bioreactors, I check the bioreactors every morning when I let the birds out because if you miss them, they're gone.
They're gone.
They're gone. They're either just too mature and they go to shit, or like you said, bugs and everything eats them because they're good.
Absolutely. Shiitakes I'd consider like a zone 2. Maitake is zone 2 or 3, that kind of thing. So certain things got to be checked more regularly. But reishi is one of those because it's a polypore and it's hard. It's not a fleshy, it's a woody one. So it lasts a long time. And most people use reishi only for its anti-inflammatory, heart health, the immune system health, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But my buddy Ben, who's one of my business partners, when he's making a roast, he'll take a big chunk of reishi, put that under the roast and let it sit in the crock pot. And it makes these just delectable, dark, deep broth that really just gives it a unique flavor. His roast is amazing.
Umami bomb again, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, AK Wilderness gave us a $4.99 super chat. Thank you, sir. And last one, HC Goad 7675. What is the best instruction manual for growing outside Zone 7A?
So for mushrooms, there's not that much about outdoor growing. This year on my YouTube channel, it's going to be all about my complete system from mushroom room to bogponic gardens to mushroom substrate, all that kind of stuff. So I'm closing the loop this year, whereas my channel has historically been teaching people how to grow mushrooms. So I'll be doing some of that, and hopefully that'll be a good guide for you. But for something you can access now, you have 3 books that I would consider. The most important one would be Mycelium Running by Paul Stamets. He's got a whole section in there even with like permaculture with a mycology bent, right? Trad Cotter's book, Growing, no. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of his book all of a sudden. Something in micro-remediation. Okay. It goes into cultivation. Anyways, organic mushroom farming and micro-remediation. Trad Cotter's who you're looking for there. Right. That book's a great one. Radical Mycology by Peter. Radical Mycology. McCoy? Yeah, Peter McCoy. That's a great book. Now that's a big, thick, expensive book. Go to his website. You'll get it like $20 cheaper.
Okay.
That thing is massive. It's got everything in the kitchen sink in it. He throws a lot of stuff in there that's probably unnecessary, but he also has a lot of stuff that's like, here's how you do it low tech. Here's how you do it outdoors. He does a lot of stuff that other mushroom guys wouldn't think to do.
Gotcha.
So that's another great one, but probably the most accessible is Mycelium Running.
Well, and I'll bring this one back around again now that I realized which
That's a
one I was
great
talking
one.
about that was audio, but Stamets' book, Growing Gourmet and Medicinal Mushrooms, that one, he actually goes into a lot of about making your patches and stuff
Yep.
like that. And then we have a partnership with Olga over at Mushroom Mountain through our members program.
Okay.
And if you live near her, she does a ton of outdoor stuff. Like they do a ton indoor, and then they do stuff in greenhouses, but they do a lot of like translocating out onto, like, she has like a couple acres and they have trails through it and all. And
I've
she's
not been
always
down there.
posting stuff.
I went last time I went to the beach. I have to drive right by Liberty, South Carolina to get there.
Okay.
And I was going to stop, and they were closed for the day I was going to stop. And I was like, no. But I've met Olga at a mushroom festival. I met Trad at some mushroom festivals. I've just never been to their place. So.
Yeah. They're split now. She bought the business out from him and he's doing other things. But yeah, they're both good dudes. I are both good people, not dudes. But I've never met her, but I met Trad years and years ago out in California at Voices, and that was pretty cool. He's a good dude. He gave me a bag of king oyster spawn.
Oh, cool.
Which I think I killed. I tried and I failed. I wasn't very good at it yet. Anyway, your website, of course, is Mossy Creek Mushrooms.com, and
Yes,
tell
sir.
people about what you guys do beyond what you already said, or reiterate it.
Absolutely. So right now, most of what we do is teach. We've fallen more into the educational side. We also offer a lot of mushroom cultures in the form of liquid culture. We have, right there's our online mentorship that we do. A lot of that, we're doing a class a month right now. If they fill up, we'll add more classes. And we teach a wide range of subjects. I also do a lot of one-on-one teaching through our consultation services. And then, growing there, we have our cultures. We got a lot more coming down the line. I am way behind on adding cultures to the list. That Moon Pearls is a super cool one. That's actually a sporeless strain. We mutated that using UV light. And basically, it only forms that. It forms these just dense little mushroom nuggets.
Oh, wow.
We've not. I'm about to test it in outdoor grows, but it's just an indoor grow right now. But yeah, it's absolutely like you slice into that. It's like a king oyster, but it's easier to grow.
Huh.
As far as like the texture goes, but we offer that as stuff. And Spawn is probably the most successful form. We're about to fully do the Spawn page. It's my wife and I that do everything, so it takes us time to get that added. But we've got a Spawn system we'll be adding. Where we're going to be offering 4 to 5 strains, and it'll be about a month from now, and then it'll be like almost immediate shipping for our Spawn system. So we're getting that down to where it's really fast. But I've bred, so that watercolor, deep blue sea, mother of pearl, I bred those, and you can see how wildly different they are.
Yeah.
That mother of pearl is very frilly. The deep blue sea's got a beautiful blue color. We have a king blue, which is a blue oyster with a massive stem. Most of the strains that we have on here, we've bred or wild collected. Yeah, that one's cool. Big, thick, meaty. And it's the same texture from the edge of the cap all the way down to where it grows out of the log. There is no stem tissue that's like firmer or anything like that. So that's a great one for if you're growing for chefs. That one's also we call that one a mortgage lifter. Yeah. Like if you want a mushroom to raise you out of poverty, the King Blue that one's going to produce more on a block. Yeah, like we've occasionally gotten 4-pound clusters off a 12-pound block, and that's a really good one to go with if you're farming. It's a little harder to grow in an outdoor scenario because it needs a little bit of coddling to get that kind of performance.
Yeah, and no block spawn for me. I got to do it myself if I buy that one, though.
No, not yet. No, we're about, like I said, about a month. We'll be offering 4 really good strains to begin with. Then we'll graduate to 8. But we'll have that for sure coming up. The Spawn page needs reworking entirely.
Well, I want to say thank you for being with me today. I did not think we would go 2 hours and almost 40 minutes, but we did. And
we have.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's with like a Rogan level podcast here. But it's an interesting subject, man. So, hey, Andrew, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. I've got one day you and I should talk more because we didn't even touch like spalting and a bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely have you back, man. And like I said, I'll reach out to you by email and make a couple introductions for you.
Yes, please. Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate you having me.
All right, man. All right, real quick, guys, before I go, I do want to remind you that one of the ways you can help support the show and the work that we do is do your online shopping at tspaz.com. That's TSPAZ, tspaz.com. I'm going to go really fast because we went so long today, but item of the day today is the Olight Arcfield Ultra EDC flashlight. I love this thing. This is my favorite EDC flashlight ever. I am not a light nerd. I'm kind of a knife nerd. Like I have all the knives and I get all into like different steels and stuff. Lights has always been like, hey, you know, I can get a decent stream light for 30, 40 bucks. That's all I need. My buddy David showed me this on a recent fishing trip. It sells for about 120 bucks, you know, day to day. Sometimes it's on sale for less. And I'm like, I don't need that. And then I used his and I'm like, yeah, I need one of these. It carries beautifully because of the form factor. It's rechargeable. David's had his for 2 years and it still works like brand new. Super bright, multiple options, including UV, because if you like looking for fungi at night, that's a real cool little hack there on top of it. It's got a pointer built into it. And the recharger is actually a magnetic recharger. So there's no hole for water, debris, and crap to get into and nothing to wear out. Check this thing out again, the Olight Arcfield. Since I brought that around the first time, right around Christmas, I've heard from a bunch of you guys that are like, well, what took you so long? It's my favorite light too. So we know we hit a home run with picking that out to add to the T-Spaz catalog. With that, guys, hope you learned a lot today. Really fantastic subject. Somebody mentioned, you know, hey, there's like 130 odd people in the live, and you know, we'll get the 100,000 plus downloads long term over 48 hours on audio only. But it is the case that, you know, like yesterday we talked about all the blood and guts and horrors and things that are going wrong, and you know, we had 5-6x the number of people in the live. To me, I would rather talk to you guys every day about solutions like we did today. And that will always be, just as it has been for almost 18 years now, the majority of what we do. I'll catch you guys tomorrow on that note with an expert counsel Q&A show for the week.